Welcome to Podcast Like It's the 2000s, the podcast where we talk about the films of the aughts here from our perch in 2024. I'm one of your hosts, Phil Lisco.
You can do better than that. I think
I got tripped up. My apologies.
I'm your other host, Emily St. James. And a fun fact about me is that sometimes men like to look at me and I can get them to do things because they're staring at me in a way that I genuinely true. And also I'm like, I don't know how I feel about this. As a trans woman, I'm frequently like, this is fascinating. I feel very validated by this. Also, misogyny exists. Interesting.
I mean, I've been around you when
it's
people
complicated. Yeah,
I've been around you when people have given you waterboard documents.
Yeah.
So I mean that's
Yes.
happened.
not that kind of waterboard
You
document.
have
Different waterboarding.
You have not been
still,
around
That's a
me
different
when
movie in a different decade.
You have not been around me when I've been waterboarded, which is a thing I do.
That's
sometimes
true.
For fun.
It's true.
Yeah.
With us today to continue our mini-series on the 2000 Best Picture nominees are the hosts of This Had Oscar Buzz podcast, Chris Feil and Joe Reid. Thank you so much for joining us, guys.
Thank you. I love it here, as someone famously said.
This movie did have Oscar buzz.
Oh,
It
yeah.
did, just a touch,
did.
Oh,
just
yeah.
a little bit.
Sure did.
Yeah.
You know, just
Went all
to
the way.
I do have. It was interesting because obviously I've seen this movie innumerable times. I love this movie, but up until I started watching it yesterday, it didn't really occur to me that it was a March release, which kind of shows that Universal didn't think this was particularly Oscar buzzy.
I think they were selling it as a a movie to make some money in the springtime with Julia Roberts' star vehicle
Right.
kind of a thing.
Yeah.
And
Which makes sense, but like for it to have the
totally.
legs to make, as we all know,
We'll
Well, and
talk
not
about
to
it, like-
jump the gun, not
Yeah,
only
yeah.
for this episode, but also for this
Yeah.
podcast. But like,
Yeah.
I think by the time this movie was being released, like Traffic was already in production. So they were like, well, Traffic can be
that's
or
yeah.
that,
Traffic was
you know?
like, and as Emily and I discussed on our Traffic episode, Traffic was one of those like last week of December, like
Very
right
late.
under the wire
very late.
type releases, which I do think is interesting. We talked on Traffic about the Soderbergh of it all, but obviously we want to talk with you guys about it as well because this is the other side of the coin of obviously a huge year for Steven Soderbergh.
I went back and read a lot of the reviews of this movie,
Yeah,
which
yeah,
are more mixed than you would expect. They're
I mean,
kind of
Reid
all over the
Ebert's,
place.
It's fucking
But
crazy.
every single, like nearly every single one is like, well, Best Actress is over. Julia Roberts is winning. And like, I think it is that thing like when DiCaprio won for The Revenant. It's like, well, he kind of dragged a lot of other stuff in the movie with him just because people had to see it for him. And I do wonder if that happened here as well, where she was so obviously going to be a major Best Actress player that it just kept the movie in people's minds.
Yeah.
It totally did. And it's kind of a shame. And it's crazy to think of that now because I think that this is a movie that's much more appreciated almost 25 years on than it was at the time. Like you mentioned some of those kind of mixed reviews. And now I think unilaterally, like people love this movie. We're on the right side of history with this movie, I think. But her performance carried this along to like Best Picture nominations, but it's also the Soderbergh thing. It is, that Soderbergh pulled off these two very different movies, had this kind of comeback narrative more than a decade after Sex, Lies, and Videotape, and then, goes off and makes his movies that don't kind of go anywhere and are these kind of like artistic statements, and then kind of comes back into the fold with Out of Sight, but comes back in a big and with the Limey, but comes back in a huge way with Erin Brockovich, and then critically with Traffic. So it's like this movie was kind of seen not only led by Julia Roberts' performance, but riding the coattails of the Soderbergh wave.
It really reminds me of Moulin Rouge a year later, where that movie got even more mixed reviews than this one. They were all over the place. But Nicole Kidman, people were like, she's fantastic. And then the movie found its audience and kind of grew across the year. And of course, it becomes a big Oscar player. But it does feel like this was a path in the early 2000s. You release in the first half of the year and you have like a big performance and you make money, and like that becomes your path to Best Picture. And we still have versions of that. Like Get Out was sort of a version of that, although its reviews were more warm. But yeah, I think that that path is, you see a lot more of that in the early 2000s.
I also think that, you know, to sort of piggyback on what you were saying, Chris, the Julia Roberts effect of this movie, like, basically blots out the sun, right? Like, it's just, she is the thing.
Yeah.
So much so that I remember I saw this in the theater.
Julia Roberts is the thing? Oh, fuck. We need to.
I remember
like walking around Antarctica with a blowtorch. I'd watch.
I saw this in theaters, and listen, I was excited about Soderbergh after Out of Sight.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of people were like excited about him. Obviously, I saw The Limey as well. Like, I was excited about going to see this movie, but I was also like, well, it's an Erin Brockovich. It's Erin Brockovich. It's a Julia Roberts vehicle.
It is also an Erin Brockovich vehicle. She gives a great performance.
She's in it. Yeah,
she does give a great performance as the diner waitress. But I think that so much so that in its moment, it was the Julia Roberts movie. And I think that the time we've had from it now has allowed this movie, first of all, for her performance, which is still great, but to kind of become a little bit more reasonable over the years. Like, I think it just felt so big and crazy in its moment. And now you watch it and you're just like, it's actually, this movie's pretty low key, all things considered.
That's the thing. It's very, even of the two Soderbergh movies, it's a much more rounded, less sort of, you know, hysterical in a way. There's a lot of, like, you know, panic at play in traffic in terms of, like, where are your kids going when you're not watching them? Are they going
all of
drug
the Douglas
dens
stuff
in
is
the city,
dragging that movie down?
Well, the message, like, there's such a message in that movie, right? Like, it's very kind of soapboxy. This movie's not really that.
Yes. Yeah. Well, and the other thing about Julia Roberts, and this is the thing that Chris and I have talked about on our podcast sort of constantly, is from the moment from the moment the Pretty Woman happens, and all of a sudden all of Hollywood's expectations are upon her, the way that the media sort of force-fed these narratives on her career in these very sort of, like, through the span of, like, literally 10 years. Pretty Woman is 1990. Erin Brockovich is 2000. This is 10 years time. And she literally went through, like, 3 comebacks in this time where, like, her career was on the skids when she, you know, left Kiefer Sutherland at the altar and made Hook and, you know, I Love Trouble. And then she had to come back with My Best Friend's Wedding. And then she does My Best Friend's Wedding and Stepmom and Notting Hill and Runaway Bride. And it's like, oh, okay, but, like, can she act, or is she just in, like, these, like, dumb rom-coms? And then she, you know, comes back, and Erin Brockovich is a movie that I think was initially received as just like, well, it's going to make money like Notting Hill did, or like, you know, Stepmom did, or whatever. And then throughout the course of that year, as people sort of had to reach back and kind of reassess the movie, because one of the things that I, you know, kind of want to get into also is the fact that, like, the 2000 Oscar race opened up spectacularly that year, and they really had to start looking for other options, because I sort of jotted down, this is my famous, like, 2000 master list of everything that went wrong in award season. Miramax had all their hopes on All the Pretty Horses. Billy Bob Thornton's All the Pretty Horses.
I was going to say All the Pretty Horses.
Everyone's favorite movie that everyone remembers
on this list.
Yep. But, like, this was the year of Pay It Forward. I think that was DreamWorks' big movie. Legend of Bagger Vance was this year. Men of Honor was this year. 13 Days. Even stuff that ultimately gets nominated for some Oscars, like Castaway and Almost Famous, have this air of people aren't quite ready to really go for them. And then, so then what you end up with is people being like, well, what was good in the spring? Gladiator made a shit ton of money and made everybody remember Ben-Hur. Erin Brockovich was a huge crowd pleaser. There's this movie from you know, Taiwan that's coming out that, like, you know, all of a sudden looks pretty cool. And then Harvey Weinstein's like, hey, how about a movie about a chocolate shop? And just like,
we talked about chocolate, and, like, holy fuck, the fact that thing got in there.
Genuinely, like, it's people doing their homework assignment the night before it's due, like the big class project, where, like, we got to scramble.
Is there, this is a total tangent, but is there a more forgotten piece of pop culture that has introduced a more integral part of our world than Pay It Forward? A thing Everybody knows what it is, and yet no one knows that movie exists.
And if people knew the shit that goes down in that movie, we would not use that phrase. We would not use that phrase.
That movie is fully insane.
It's from the 11th layer of hell. Yes, it is. Yeah. It is a torture device. It is an instrumentality of evil in this world.
Did it get any Oscar nominations? Did it?
Hell no.
Why? Just because I wasn't sure. You must have covered it on your podcast.
We've covered
it was like episode 3. We should do it again.
We should. We honestly could do it, like revisiting Pay It Forward. But you had these movies weird. That got like reevaluated in real time almost. And I think Erin Brockovich was one of those movies. They're like, wait a second, this isn't just a Julia Roberts movie. This is also now all of a sudden Steven Soderbergh having 2 movies. This is a big story. This is also in Albert Finney great. By the way, spoiler, he fucking is. He's fucking great.
I mean, but see, like Albert Finney was kind of treated like a coattail thing as well. And Albert Finney should have won. Albert Finney is incredible.
As good as Benicio is in Traffic.
Yeah,
I am too. Like as good as Benicio is in Traffic, and I think he is very good in that movie. And I also feel like I mean I think he is.
Thank you, Benicio, actor of that movie.
Also true. It's not really supporting, but that's a whole other thing. I am kind of surprised that Albert Finney doesn't win this, just based on like a career and a whatever.
He didn't quite have the narrative that like Peter O'Toole did in terms of like so many nominations, and he's never won. But like he basically had that kind of a narrative. I think he was on like 5 nominations without winning.
Albert Finney's also someone who I think never showed up for any of his nominations, and I don't think did any campaigning. That type of narrative can take hold if you actually like show up and kiss a baby or 2.
Right. They're not going to give it to a still photo.
I'm still going to give it to Benicio. I think he's fantastic in that movie. I also
no fault to Benicio.
But if Albert Finney had won, I wouldn't have been upset. He's so fun in this movie.
So Emily, I know that you're not a Julia girl.
I'm not a Julia Roberts person. I'm not a Brockistan. No,
but
my wife.
Like her in this?
My wife is a fucking Julia Roberts super fan. Sure. I think she's really good in this. I think, you know what? Back when this Oscar race was happening, I was all pissy that she was winning everything because I loved Ellen Burstyn in Requiem for a Dream. Sure. I probably still slightly prefer her if I'm asked
it's to pick. It's one of the great best actress lineups of all time.
It is.
This is the best actress lineup that, all respect to Juliette Binoche, Joe and I often say. Toss a coin on any day and you could have an opinion that somebody different should have won than you had the day before. But like,
so this is, forgive me for our listeners. Let me pull up the nominees again, or you guys know them off
Julia Roberts, perhaps? It's Ellen Burstyn in Requiem for a Dream. It's Laura Linney and You Can Count on Me, who I sometimes feel like should win because like she's
amazing.
Incredible. And then Joan Allen in The Contender.
A better movie than people remember. Like,
totally.
Sure. I like that. I mean, there is
showing The Contender
stuff in that
cable,
movie, but it is very entertaining.
Other movies, like people would watch The Contender on a weekend and like.
Emily, you wanted. We talked about this. There was a person you wanted in there for sure.
This is a thing that I'm struggling to remember because it was one of our other episodes about.
Renee Zellweger in Their Study was up in the race this year.
Bjork
for Dancer in the Dark was up in the race.
Yeah, sure. As I put Bjork in there over Joan Allen and Juliette Binoche as well, personally. But...
I did love Renee Zellweger in Their Study. I don't remember precisely what movie it was. It was
Dunstan, Bring It On.
Could it have been? Okay. What year was because we were talking Samantha Morton? What year was Morvern? Was that
that was 2002? Yeah, it will inevitably come up in some episode that hasn't been dropped yet.
People will love it and it'll be great.
But yeah,
you're talking about Piper Perabo and Coyote Ugly and you don't really
absolutely.
Is it Sanaa Lathan for Love and Basketball?
No, it was Michelle Yeoh.
Of course.
Should have been.
Of course.
Yes. And like if you put Michelle Yeoh in there, I'm really torn between her and Linney and Burstyn and Roberts. They're all timers. It's and like Joan Allen's fun in The Contender. I don't want to, if not at the level of the others. Yeah,
Were you just
I'm
pissy because Julia was like a freight train that could not be stopped?
yeah,
That's basically what
I
it
get
was?
bored when the same person wins
Yeah.
everything, and that's like no offense to them or whatever. I just get bored.
Sure, I mean, understandable.
You know, it's like when Donald Trump kept winning primaries. I was like, I'm just bored by this. There should be somebody else.
Jesus.
There was no other reason I was upset about that.
This is why I ultimately am more invested in the nominations than I am the whoever
Yeah.
ends up winning. Because but
Yeah.
if I'm invested in who ends up winning, it's just the most boring way to
Yeah,
be invested
totally.
in the Oscars.
But yeah, so I was not too enamored, but at the time I was like, it's a good performance, but I'm pissy about it. Rewatching it, I had not seen it since theaters until I rewatched it last night, and rewatching it, all of the issues I had with it in 2000, I still have, but I have flipped over from back then being like, this movie is too much of a movie star vehicle derogatory to this movie is too much of a movie star vehicle complimentary. Like I've gone on this journey.
Scarcity economy,
Yeah.
like now
Because we don't have those.
Yeah.
I've gone on this journey where I'm like, a lot of the things that I think in this movie still don't work for me, but I'm like, but I wish this movie still existed. I think it is a little bit glib about its class circumstances in a way that befits itself as a movie star vehicle, but it's at least talking about class. Like how many movies are doing that now at this level that aren't like weird little indies, you know?
The way it tries to paint Ed Masry as like, well, I'm a lawyer and I have a ton of money, but like not as much a ton of money as, Peter Coyote. This guy's living high on
This guy's got money.
I don't have PG&E money. Like, you know what I mean? Like that kind of. Yeah.
It is interesting. The thing that hit me this time watching it was how light a touch Soderbergh has in this movie, how sort of not showy it is, and how sort of like low key it is. His influences are there, obviously. It's got kind of that 70s vibe to it. That the opening with her smoking up against the wall could be Gina Rowlands. I mean, like it really does have that kind of vibe to it. And I really do appreciate, to sort of piggyback on what you guys are talking about in terms of movie stars. Soderbergh knows how to use movie stars so well. I would argue, as a director right now, he's one of the best in terms of understanding their power, understanding what audiences are so connected with and why they love these people, and yet also making it look easy, right? Like making it not feel like a thing.
To like go on someone who was never quite a movie star. Nobody has ever made Aaron Eckhart look hotter than Steven.
I mean, this is not my type of guy, but like my Harley's revving, like
he's great in this. Like I sort of, that was my sort of cheeky little letterboxed angle when I reviewed it the other night was the men in this movie. My God, like I always hyper focus on the women and everything. And of course, the first 20 times I've watched Erin Brockovich, I was like, Marg Helgenberger, man, Conchata Ferrell, she's like, pulling in and punching.
Charity
and now
Jones,
I'm just like, Finney, Eckhart, Tracy Walter, the character actors who are the dads,
husbands
on the
and
plume.
dads.
And all these guys, and it's just like, man, like everybody's sort of firing in this movie.
This movie runs on an applause track in my house. Just every character actor entrance, standing ovation in my house.
When Cherry Jones shows up at that doorstep, like
truly, the crowd goes wild.
You know that video of people watching in the bar as when Arya like stabs the Night King? That's how it is when like yeah.
I will say though that so when I saw this in theaters, I mean, played like fucking gangbusters, right? Like every line that Erin says got just, amazing amount of laughter.
Yeah.
So much so that when you watch it now, there's like breaks for laughter. It's crazy to watch. Like where you're just
extremely confident film.
What are we doing here? Like we don't need to just sit on like a reaction of somebody, but it's so supremely confident that it knows.
All those applause breaks are reaction shots to the character actors, and that's part of the reason why I think on rewatch we gravitate towards all these character actors, because they're given so much space, but it's also this economy of making it a better experience for the audience so you can make laughter somewhere, and then
What is really underrated about Soderbergh as a blockbuster filmmaker, by which I mean big Hollywood films, but is that like you see this in the Ocean's films too, where he like knows the moment people are going to want to like cheer or laugh or whatever, and he cuts to like here's Carl Reiner going "Brr," and like that, and that like really like props things up. My Libby watched this with me. She did not watch Traffic with me. She wandered in for like 30 seconds and was like, nope, I'm not going to do that. But she rewatched Erin Brockovich with me. We were talking about how Soderbergh has this year when he conquers the Oscars, and then he just never has that again. And it's not as though he hasn't made movies that were successful, because I had it, you have him in your head as like this very esoteric filmmaker, but he makes the Oceans films. He makes Magic Mike, which you could have seen some sort of campaign for. It's like Contagion is the sort of thing that, and I do think if Logan Lucky, which is one of my favorites of his, had been at all of a hit, I think it would have gotten more traction, just because it was like the narrative around how him like taking over marketing for that film was so.
Oh yeah, who released that? Who was the studio?
I think that was a Bleecker Street release.
It was
Bleecker.
Yes.
Yeah,
it was. Yep.
Like, how did that happen? Like, how did no one raise their hand for that movie?
Well, he wanted to do all his own marketing, and everyone was like, no, Steven, you can't do your marketing. And it ended up being that they were right about that, because he didn't do a very good job marketing it. But
that movie's
to the
great.
Point where we just recently had an episode on this had Oscar buzz about Let Them All Talk, which is a movie that came out in 2020 when the Oscars were begging for real movies to nominate, and that movie didn't even get a campaign because they were so indifferent to whether it was television or not television. And Soderbergh was like, "Fuck if I care, I don't know, like whatever." Like, and it's like,
meanwhile, one of the performances of the decade.
Like, I mean, how Candice Bergen doesn't get a nomination in that movie? Like, how do these people not get nominations?
She's great. How does Streep not get nominated in a year where like Rosamund Pike is pulling down Golden Globes for I Care a Lot? Like, what are we doing here, people? Like, what's going on?
Yeah.
I think a lot about how Soderbergh, I think I talked about this in the Traffic episode, but I remember sitting there in the pandemic being like, everyone was like, there's no movies anymore. And I was like, yeah, but Steven Soderbergh is filming like 3 movies right now in his apartment. I didn't even know he was doing that, but he was. And it's like, I am fascinated by this movie Presence, which I haven't seen yet. But like,
I'm excited.
I know, I'm excited to see it. His like Black Bag sounds fucking fantastic.
Yeah.
This
Black Bag is gonna rip. I'm predicting that right now. Black Bag
bless
is
this
gonna
guy.
be awesome.
Yeah.
And it's
he's just like, I'm still making movies and I don't give a shit.
I'm so fascinated by how he continues to make these crowd-pleasing movies, but in an era when those movies no longer please crowds.
Right.
It's such a weird thing. Like, everything I've heard about Presence makes it sound like a horror movie from the 70s. And like, that's not the horror language we use now, but I'm sure I'm gonna really enjoy it. By the way, 3 filmmakers who've won Best Director have movies coming out in January, which is very unusual.
Oh wow!
January is going to be very interesting.
Oh, Bong Joon-ho.
Bong
Sure.
Joon-ho.
What's the third?
Steven Soderbergh and Mel Gibson. So Mel Gibson.
Okay.
I will say, for as much as I don't want to watch a Mel Gibson movie, every time I see that trailer, I'm like, this is so dumb. I want to see it so bad. Like,
wait,
so
what's
bad.
how do I not know?
Light Risk.
It's the
oh, because I just
Mark
see that and
Wahlberg.
I'm like, no, I don't even get to the point.
You don't need it.
Mob Hitman. Oh, I'm excited.
Can I also just say, just in terms of Soderbergh movies that didn't get their due, Behind the Candelabra is a movie that should have been released in theaters.
Yeah,
it's and I know that was kind of what broke him, the fact that that had to get quote unquote dumped as an HBO
somewhere
film.
In America right now. Matt Damon is giving an interview about the economics behind the Candelabra and why that's an example of why middle budget movies don't work anymore.
But like, I think that movie has some real highs and real lows, but like that Douglas performance is.
I mean, Douglas is great.
How does that not get a theatrical release? Just
for
so
sure. And Rob Lowe in that movie.
Oh my god,
Rob Lowe. Yes.
Like it's a great movie. But speaking of awards, and Julia Roberts, for her performance in this film, she became the first actress to simultaneously win Best Actress at the Academy Awards, Screen Actors Guild, BAFTA, Critics' Choice, and Golden Globes, which I find kind of surprising. Someone must have done that since.
BAFTA was doing their own thing for a while there.
Okay,
is what that comes down to. BAFTA had like a slow process of sort of like hewing to the Oscars line that they were
fair enough.
And some of that comes down to release dates too, when things were being distributed in the UK. This is about the time where things start to change and they're like, oh, this is good for our strategy to get out within the BAFTA deadline. Let's start doing that.
So to give a little bit of context for, I don't know, people who haven't seen Erin Brockovich, I guess they exist. Erin Brockovich is a woman in a tight spot following a car accident in which is not her fault. Erin pleads with her attorney, Ed Masry, to hire her at his law firm. Erin stumbles upon medical records placed in real estate files. She convinces Ed to allow her to investigate, where she discovers a cover-up involving contaminated water in a local community, which is causing devastating illnesses amongst its residents. Erin Brockovich opened on March 17th, 2000, against Final Destination, Mission to Mars, My Dog Skip, and 99 Holdovers, The Ninth Gate, and American Beauty. It would go on to make $256 million on a $52 million budget. It has 85% on Rotten Tomatoes from critics and 81% from audiences. It was nominated for Best Picture, Actress, Director, Supporting Actor, Adapted Screenplay, and it won, as we mentioned, Best Actress.
I think that it's really wild that this weekend you see this come out, which wins Best Actress, and you see My Dog Skip come out, which wins Best Actor for Skip.
It's crazy.
The youngest Best Actor winner ever. Skip, the dog.
Skip. Yeah.
But I mean, in dog years, he's technically the oldest.
Right. That's weird how that happens. Yeah. Yeah.
I want to read a little bit of Roger Ebert's 2-star review for Erin Brockovich because it melted my fucking brain. Okay.
I want to say I read this and was like, I mostly agree with this, but
Emily, you're insane.
You're insane. But also, I think I agree with it, and I think he's wrong. It's like the thing that I came.
Okay. So here,
how far into before we get into this, how far into the review does it take Roger to talk about her breasts? Because
first, literally, like the first paragraph.
Thank you. Every Roger Ebert, Ebert, may he rest.
Emily,
legend,
you cannot possibly agree with his sentiments on.
He was such a boob guy. Like all Angelina Jolie reviews by him are gross.
You don't even know how much of this review is dedicated to her breasts.
I agree.
But continue, please.
I agree with Roger Ebert that Julia Roberts had breasts. That is very true.
Yes, okay, I'll agree with that. I'll give you that. Sure.
That is a factual statement.
Erin Brockovich is Silkwood, Meryl Streep fighting nuclear waste, crossed with A Civil Action, John Travolta against pollution, plus Julia Roberts in a plunging neckline. First sentence. Roberts plays a real-life heroine who helped uncover one of the biggest environmental crimes in history, but her performance upstages the story. This is always Roberts, not Brockovich. The unwise wardrobe decisions positioned her character somewhere between a caricature and a distraction. I know all about the Erin Brockovich, the real Erin Brockovich, because I saw her on Oprah, where she cried at the right moment in a filmed recap of her life. How can you agree with this review, Emily? There is obviously
real-life Erin Brockovich.
There is obviously a story here, but Erin Brockovich doesn't make it compelling. The film lacks focus and energy. The character development is facile and thin. And what about those necklines? I know that the real Erin Brockovich liked to dress provocatively. That's her personal style. She's welcome to it. Whether she was or wasn't, the costume design sinks the movie. Roberts is a sensational-looking woman and dressed so provocatively in every single scene, she upstages the material. If the medium is the message is this movie is sex. Erin Brockovich has a screenplay with the depth and insight of a cable TV docudrama, and that won't do for a 126-minute movie, quote unquote, major production. Maybe it's not the necklines that are distracting. Maybe it's just that the movie gives us so little to focus on that's what wins by default.
I disagree that there should be less boobs.
It is shockingly a misreading of this movie on so many levels.
I kind of co-sign all of that, but again, complimentary. Like I feel like I do. My biggest problem with this movie. My biggest problem with this movie is also its strongest thing, which is Julia Roberts. She takes this story and makes it a movie star thing, and I think that I think there's a version of this movie that's a little more down to earth and a little more staid that I like more, but it wouldn't have been a hit. And that's the tension of this movie.
That's fair. I think my issue, I have a lot of issues with Ebert's review here. I literally read it gobsmacked, just being like, get over yourself and boobs. truly, it's crazy that Roger Ebert was so enraptured with her boobs that he could not even focus on anything else in this movie.
And to not only admit that, but then to make that the movie's problem, I feel like is very.
This is
funny.
like
It's
this
crazy.
This is a constant theme of a lot of the reviews is look at the boobs. And it's like obviously film criticism has always been a male dominated industry, was so much more so in 2000. But it's like a lot of the reviews were like, yeah, this is distracting from the rest of the movie, and I'm like, that's an interesting way to put it, my friends.
But I also on your behalf,
100%. I also think that he opens this review by comparing it to two other movies that are understandable from a subject matter perspective.
Sure,
but this is doing something completely different. Also, Civil Action is just not very good. So, like, Silkwood's a great movie. I'm not poo-pooing Silkwood, but don't put them in the same category. They're doing totally different things.
I think if you wanted the Mike Nichols version of this movie, it would be very different. And like, to some extent, that's kind of what I want from it. But like the crowd pleaser version of it also works. And I think if this were not based on a true story, that would have alleviated some of these critics' concerns, because now that it's 25 years later, yes, we know it's based on a true story, but it kind of doesn't fucking matter anymore, because obviously PG&E is no longer poisoning people and everything's fine and the environment's been fixed.
No, it's totally fine. We fixed it. Everything's fixed. Yeah.
Well, there's also
Flint, Michigan.
I take umbrage with a few things. My thing is, okay, I could understand having a position like this shouldn't be a star vehicle with this subject. Okay, the alternative is you have this really scattered movie. So much of this movie goes to so many lengths to say how many clients they have in this case. It's impossible to center just the clients unless you're centering just one client
and in a courtroom.
Yeah, and like there is a tradition of these type of movies being seen through this lens. Silkwood is a great example. Norma Ray, and like those are all great movies. But also like what did I have? I'm kind of flabbergasted. We'll get to the boobs thing because like that was everybody's problem. I kind of take umbrage with the idea. It sounds like he wants it to be more of an issue movie, because I think that part of what makes this movie work so well is that it's not so issue forward, and like we still get invested in the issue. We are so emotionally invested, and it's a very righteous movie by the end of it. But like the movie version of this is like at least 20% less good if it is issue first type
it's a David versus the other guy movie. Like that's kind of what it is. And
and there's still plenty of that in this in this movie. It picks its moments. Obviously every scene with a lawyer from PG&E, and there are like multiple ones that are like set up slightly differently from each other, but they're all incredibly sort of like condescending and wielding their billions of dollars to their advantage. But the other thing that I love about Erin Brockovich is that by making it a star vehicle, it makes the central issue, I think, even more compelling in its, I mean, this is going to sound like I'm saying it's better because it's dumber, but what I'm saying is it's so easily palatable to figuring out what's going on. And I think part of it is because you have this main character who's not a genius, who's not an expert, whose whole sort of space in this legal case is that she's new to this and she's learning on the job. So she kind of asks everybody. The most like important scene to the movie in some ways is when she talks to that guy at the university and he's like, all right, Chrome 6, here's what it does. Here's where it gets, like, here's why it's bad. Here's how it affects people. Here's why, they used it. And it's like 2.5 minutes and it's done. And you're like, cool, I got it. All I need to know. No, go get these.
To that point, this movie delineates expositional and scientific information perfectly, right? Like it is crazy to watch. Like as a writer, I was watching it just thinking like, this is like screenwriting 101 when it comes to like finding a way to make an audience understand things that are really hard to understand or to just do well and exciting.
Full of Donna Mosses, and it's literally
yes.
being like, all right,
yes.
here's what
yes.
binding arbitration means, and let's just
It's
there's a scene that I think is a perfect scene in this movie, but illustrates this perfectly, and I also think illustrates why I think Roger Ebert is wrong. It's the scene where she has to tell Mark Helgenberger what is actually going on. It clearly states for the audience the way that these people have been lied to, who's doing the lying, and who's going to
and what the emotional stakes of it are at the end, because then you see Mark Helgenberger go into freak out mode.
Yes, that scene ends on an emotional beat and ends on our emotional investment, and that's why I think Ebert is wrong.
My takeaway from that scene, though, is homina, 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 awooga, awooga.
Sure. Yeah, no, I get that.
I think,
like this woman has to get her kids out of her polluted pool because it's going to
but
kill
there's boobs.
Them. But you know, there
run
were
past those boobs first, and like, how's she going to do that?
What are you talking about?
To argue against the obvious misogyny in all of these reviews, while also, you know, having my agreements with them in some weird way. I do think part of this is it's about a woman, and I think that I think that critics of this era were prepared to accept a film about a woman if she's like dressed down, if she's sort of de-glammed, to use the Oscar term. And like, but you look back at like reviews of Silkwood, and that has a similar thing. It's like, if Erin Brockovich was spelled Aaron, and this movie was like Kevin Costner doing all of this in plunging necklines, to be clear, like, I don't think
it would have won Best Picture.
It would have won Best Picture. I don't think there would have been any of the like criticisms that, you know, you can't follow the story, or like that the story is not, the issues are not important, because it is very, again, for my issues in that regard, it is pretty clearly laid out throughout the film, all of the things that are happening.
Yeah, I also think Silkwood's a really interesting movie to use as an example, because Silkwood is a movie that glammed down Cher so much so that people would take her seriously, because you know, I mean, obviously you can't do that character.
She's still like, stunning, and she's still like, that was a big part of the thing of just like, you know, how are we going to share in a movie about like, you know, factory workers or whatever? So
it still can be a star vehicle, and is a movie that goes to great lengths to show the humanity of all of these people who were affected by this, and do it in an elegant way that is still a star vehicle, but also like isn't reducing all of these people to like a monolith. You know, they're not just this crowd of sad people that this horrible thing happened to. The movie shows
want to go along with everybody. They got to get her on their side.
Yeah, Cherry Jones,
like there's infighting happening. They're like, you know, all of these people are populated by character actors who are going to make like all of these people that we encounter different people than the last, you know, individuals.
Totally.
It is like an interest. And Norma Rae's another sort of interesting comparison point, because obviously Sally Field wins Best Actress for that, but it's very much a role that is tailored to Sally Field as you've never seen her before. This movie is Julia Roberts as you've seen her several times, but she's just going to be better than you've ever seen it. And it's just like, she's going to just lock in. Like, she's not really playing. You can always tell she's playing Julia Roberts as a woman who doesn't have a lot of money, if that makes sense. But that's part of the movie star thing, which is why we love them and why we like to go see them. But the version where they like de-glammed her is more of a traditional Oscar play, and this kind of accidentally became an Oscar play.
Well, I do, so I kind of take a little bit of umbrage with the de-glamming thing. I understand that like she is wearing audacious outfits and she's got on like crazy makeup, but there are many scenes with her not wearing a lot of makeup, just kind of looking kind of like a bit of a schlub at times. Like I know that it's not, but I know like what you're saying, but she's still Julia Roberts. Like there's nothing you can do to Julia Roberts that is going to make her not look like Julia Roberts.
No, like I mean, a couple years later, Charlize Theron wins, and like that is the obvious example of, you know, she put on a lot of weight. They did like big makeup with her. Like that is the thing that you traditionally would do, except Erin Brockovich, the actual person, is a very lively, feisty, attractive person.
Yeah.
And so, you know,
Yeah.
with
that's what Julia
moisturized
Roberts is playing.
skin.
It is
like,
fun.
you know.
But I also, but you have to agree that like Charlize Theron and the monster, that's its own thing. Like that's its own category of, in my opinion, problematic.
No,
Like
sure,
I think
yeah.
it's, you know what I'm saying? Like
I'm not defending de-glamming.
Okay.
I'm just saying that
Yes.
this is not, I do not think of this as a traditional version of that, like that Oscar
fair.
bait idea,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
can apply to men, but almost never does.
Yeah, never does. I do think though, and I think this speaks to what we're all saying, that like the subject matter of this movie, like what this movie is about, could have been a very middle of the road movie, right? Like could have been a super generic, could ultimately be the movie that Roger Ebert thinks it is, but he's wrong, right? Like it's not a made for TV movie. And I think the reason it's not a made for TV movie is Steven Soderbergh is a phenomenal director. Julia Roberts is, I think, to your point, Emily, doing something different. It's a slightly different gear that she's in this movie. But I also think Susanna Grant and Richard LeGraveness, and I'm sure you guys, being Oscar aficionados, we will get into the strife that seemed to come out of the writing of this movie.
Yeah.
But I think this movie makes it look easy, makes it seem really simple, or maybe even simplistic. But I think there is a tremendous amount of nuance going on in this movie, in the way that not only it's written on the page, but in the way so much of this dialogue is thrown away. The casting of those kids, the groundedness that this movie feels lived in. Right, like when she goes to Ed's office, we've been in offices like that, populated by real people and shitty wood paneling, and like we've all been in places where these people,
they all just kind of instantly don't like her, and they come around on her, but not in these like really like aha moment. I mean, to steal a phrase from Oprah, who was very like up front in the marketing of this movie. Oprah was ready to make this movie happen. But like you don't have this big moment where like Conchata Ferrell's like, I misjudged you, Erin. Like, no, they just like they just sort of suddenly, there's the nice lady with the bowl full of candy, and like she's the nice one. I love her so much.
It's more satisfying when you get a reaction shot of like one of Erin's coworkers that used to talk shit about her being like, and what, when Erin says something, you know?
Right.
Like it's more satisfying.
But we even don't get her ending up with George. Right? Like they keep that messy.
It's not a romance about her and a man. It's a romance about her and the job. And I love that.
All of these are things that make this movie stand out from the movie that Roger Ebert seems to be baking this into.
He's dead, Phil. You won.
Whatever. I'm going to keep kicking him.
He was right on a lot of things. We all can be wrong about.
I love Roger Ebert. You know I love him. But when he's wrong, he's very wrong.
Yeah. Very good baby casting in this. That baby grows up.
Yes.
Like,
yes. Best line in the movie. I want that.
I want that.
I want that too.
What a great moment. Yeah.
And just the improv, quote unquote, of is there a baby in there? It's not a baby. Like the way that Julia plays off of the kid. Like again, it's just really good.
There's some fantastic little moments and line deliveries. The moment where what does she say to Ed that that his rejoinder is just like, I'm married. You know what I mean? I can't remember what the lead up to that is.
I think the strongest opinion
so
I'm going to have on this episode is that I think this is the most quotable movie of the past 25 years.
I mean, it's so quotable.
Maybe it's because it's myself and so many people that like I talk to about movies have seen this 20,000 times.
Because it's amazing.
Yeah.
But to your point, Joe, it's when he comes to her house and says, you dress like you go and have a good time. And she says, oh, you don't ever get laid? He's like,
right. So I should assume that the way you dress that you never get laid. And he just looks at her and he's like, I'm married. That's great. I also want to clear up, because I know that there are people out here who watch The Real Housewives of Beverly Hills and know that Erica Jane's now in, scandal prone husband.
Sure.
Is the lawyer from the Erin Brockovich case, but he's not the Albert Finney character.
Is he the Peter Coyote character?
I believe he's the Peter Coyote character, who's like not. But because like there is a real Ed Masry, and like that's an actual person. And
may he rest. Ed Masry has passed.
And Albert Finney for that matter.
Yeah.
But it is a deeply quotable movie, but I again, just to sort of to underline what you guys were saying about how like not only is this movie deeply rewatchable and unbelievably accessible for which you can see by its box office, but like there is something meaningful and human, and I do think that Soderbergh doesn't kind of do this again. Like he doesn't really go back to this kind of, you know, human drama kind of. Do you know what I mean? Like I'm trying to think of something else in his filmography since this movie, and I don't really think there is anything. Is there?
I think Magic Mike is very.
I was going to say it's weird.
Yeah.
Okay, that's fair.
Yeah,
that's fair.
Magic Mike is not a true story, but it is about lower class people attempting to improve their circumstances, and like has big flashy moments. It's a big movie star movie, you know. I think that's
maybe even more of an issue movie because it's so representative of, you know.
Yeah, that's fair.
The post.
I mean, the fact that turned into an amazing trilogy is just like chef's kiss, man.
Our finest franchise, the Magic Mike.
I know, like he didn't direct Magic Mike XXL. He didn't do that. But like, but that's like, I think even more true of sort of what we're talking about. But I'm looking at that year's SAG Awards because Albert Finney won supporting actor there. That is truly the most chaotic SAG Awards of all time.
Well, because Benicio del Toro, SAG goes off of how you're submitted. Like you have to actually be submitted for their categories. And for whatever reason, Benicio del Toro was submitted as a lead there.
And he wins lead. Benicio wins lead. Julia wins.
Best actor was a complete like up for grabs. So like those vote totals were probably spread over everybody.
Julia wins for Erin Brockovich. It's the only corresponding to who wins the Oscar. Albert Finney wins supporting. We've talked about this in our Chocolat episode. Judi Dench wins supporting. And then the award for the ensemble is Traffic. But the nominees there are like Traffic, Almost Famous, Billy Elliot, Chocolat, and Gladiator. So two of the Best Picture nominees, Erin Brockovich and Crouching Tiger, are just not in that outstanding performance by a cast category. It is a truly chaotic year at the SAG.
How did Chocolat get a fucking SAG nomination for ensemble?
Well,
Harvey Weinstein.
We can't forget how
Gladiator. I know there are some very good performances in Gladiator, but it's wild that Gladiator gets nominated over Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, and Erin Brockovich.
Well, there's also a certain thing, and I don't think this is as much now. Like you have to have it's still true. You have to have a solo screen credit to be in the ensemble lineup for SAG. So I'm not sure who has a solo screen credit beyond Finney and Roberts.
Finney, Roberts, Eckhart, and Helgenberger. I was paying attention to that. And then I think everybody else is shared. So it would be like a 4-person ensemble.
I see.
Which a few years later, they would nominate $1 Million Baby for ensemble, and it was Freeman, Eastwood, and Swank, and that was it.
And that was ensemble?
That's wrong. No Margot Martindale, no Jay Baruchel. That's...
I want to talk about the screenplay situation for a quick second here with this movie. So this movie gets a nomination for wait, am I crazy? Yeah, okay. Original
Janet
screenplay.
Grant's
Sorry.
the only one who gets nominated.
She's the only one. Cameron Crowe wins for Almost Famous this year. Billy Elliott's also nominated, as is Gladiator, and You Can Count on Me. It's a pretty stacked category, quite honestly. I mean, we were
just talking about this recently in an episode.
Oh, really?
Yeah, what was the movie we were talking about, Chris, that got us onto this?
Unbreakable.
Oh, right, of course.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, it'd be in probably my top 10 original screenplays of that year, for sure.
That was another movie that I think had expectations to it, and the audience didn't really know what to do with it.
For sure.
Phil, would you pick Almost Famous or Erin Brockovich? Because I know you love them
Almost
both.
Famous 1,000,000%.
Okay.
Not even.
I'd pick You Can Count on Me of those five.
You Can Count on Me is, I think,
that's the Joe Reid pick.
You Can Count on Me and Almost Famous are two of my favorite movies of all time. So that's a very, very difficult one for me.
Right.
But I think Almost Famous is maybe my best picture of that year, and You Can Count on Me is my screenplay winner.
I would probably agree with you if I'm given the opportunity to give Almost Famous Best Picture, then I'm fine with it losing Best Screenplay. But if it's not, then it's taking home an Oscar as far as I'm concerned. But I think You Can Count on Me is a wonderful, wonderful script, and I think Erin Brockovich is a great script. I'm curious. So people can read online. There was a interview or maybe like a oral history of Erin Brockovich or something that happened, I want to say within the last like 5-10 years, where like Graveness was pretty open about the fact that he was quite adamant that he deserved a credit on the script. And
Julia thanked him in her Oscar speech. I will say that. Yeah.
Which also speaks volumes, I think, about sort of how involved he was. And we, these arbitrations are always strange, especially with screenplay, where you get into sort of this weird situation where if the WGA, for right or wrong, has always sort of put a lot of weight on sort of bearing walls of plot and sort of structure.
Yeah.
And if you don't alter that in some way, then you don't deserve credit.
I don't know how people make those distinctions. Like it's such a I'm impressed by the people who have to do it, because like that's but also I can't imagine that doesn't in some way just come down to a flip a coin judgment call in a lot of these things.
It seems as though Richard LeGraveness, who did a significant rewrite on the film in terms of the voice of the characters, and just, I think Richard LeGraveness is a wonderful writer. He's written some absolutely wonderful films, some of my favorite films, and I think Susanna Grant is a good writer too. I can't say that as I love her work as much as Richard LeGraveness, but that being said, I can understand his frustrations, and it's odd to me that you wouldn't just either give him like an and on the screenplay or a story credit or something. Like for him to get nothing is odd, especially when writers are very outspoken. They just tend to be like, here, just take a fucking EP credit or something and like just please go away. So I'm a little surprised by all of that.
Oh God, Susanna Grant wrote and directed that Laura Dern, Liam Hemsworth movie that's getting such terrible reviews.
The one everybody is so like, I was like looking, what's she done? What's she done for me lately? And then like,
what has she done for you lately, Emily?
Although she did do the screenplay adaptation for In Her Shoes, one of my favorite movies of the 2000s. So.
Did she not do the 28 Days movie?
She did do
28 Days. Yeah,
so that was Sandra's first like kind of Oscar bait, right?
I quite like her little rom-com catch and release. I don't think it's a great movie.
I like that too. I like that movie.
And you know what?
That dares to cast Kevin Smith as the gay ? Best friend. Yes. I don't know whether I can't remember whether Kevin Smith is gay or gay coded in that movie. And I
quite underrated feat of adaptation is her script for the Charlotte's Web movie. She had a good 2000s, and she did that Netflix miniseries Unbelievable, which is wonderful, terrific.
Oh, that is true. What a great show that was.
But also with Islet Waldman and Michael Chabon, if I'm not mistaken. Not to take away from her work.
She came up through one of my favorite shows of the 90s, Party of Five. So
interesting.
Yeah.
So also wasn't A Gifted Man her as well? Am I making that up?
I reviewed like so many episodes of that for the website, the AV Club, and I everybody loved that I wrote reviews of A Gifted Man. The pilot, directed by Jonathan Demme, one of the great pilots of that period, the early 2010s.
I should watch the pilot then.
But then the rest of the show,
an EP credit on Fleischman is in Trouble, but I'm not sure what
she is, I believe she is a non-writing producer that helped Taffy and is also on the Apple thing that she's doing for Lessons Long Island Compromise. So I think there's not Lessons in Chemistry.
She did Lessons in Chemistry as well. Yeah.
But yeah, so Long Island Compromise she's doing with Taffy. I think there's some sort of a non-writing.
As someone whose novel rights are hopefully by the time this is like her rights are sold, this is a big thing. It's like you attach like a veteran showrunner, and then the novelist like writes it, but the showrunner's there to like, I think the new rules after the strike are going to change that up.
It's a little bit of training wheels. It's a little bit of like novelists that haven't done television shows, especially novelists. I think you get into situations where they're too close to the material, and sometimes you need someone to be like, it actually needs to be a TV show. It's not actually a book. You know what I mean? Like,
which is good. I'm glad that that people, and I thought Fleischman turned out tremendous.
I love Fleischman. I thought it was fantastic. There's Thomas Newman's score, great, one of his best, I would say.
I was texting with somebody about this one where talking about the sort of Thomas Newman sometimes writes scores in clusters. Yes. And some of his scores sort of like rhyme with each other. This feels like it's in the cluster with American Beauty and White Oleander and that sort of era, but it's like it's so distinct and memorable.
The Pay It Forward score he does is absolutely Erin Brockovich leftovers.
That's true. I remember you mentioning that when we recorded that episode, and then I went back and listened to it, and I was just like, "Oh, holy shit! It's exactly right."
Yeah,
it's just, barely.
I mean, Thomas Newman, who's a journeyman, right? He's been doing a million scores. He's done, but it does feel like American Beauty was the one that, because that movie was such a hit and because it was such a critic's darling, everyone used that as temp score for him. So whenever he had to show up and do the actual score, they're like, "Can you just do that again?" And he's like, "Motherfucker, I'd like." He
also has stuff like Road to Perdition and Angels in America, which sound like each other, but in a very different way than the American Beauty ones. So
has he ever won? I want to say he has not, right?
He hasn't. I remember that was one of the things I had when I was editing Vulture's award section one year. I had Bobby Finger write or interview Thomas Newman and about all of his nominations, but sort of famously he had never won.
13 nominations, he's like, no wins.
One of the most nominated people who has never won, and nobody ever talks about it. It's kind of crazy.
So I'm gonna read these nominations just because I think it's worth reading, because some of them you're just like, okay. So Shawshank Redemption, obviously a fucking banger. I mean, iconic. The First Little Women, or not the first, but the Gillian Armstrong. Okay, Unstrung Heroes.
What again? The best Little Women, as we all know on this podcast.
Nope. No, I will not stand for that. American Beauty, Road to Perdition, Finding Nemo, all bangers, right?
Great.
Lemony Snicket, sure. The Good German.
Hey.
Yep.
There we go.
Speaking of Soderbergh, we're back to Soderbergh. Yeah.
What? A movie that straight up doesn't exist.
We can't do it on our goddamn flagship podcast now because of that nomination, although we can do it on our Patreon at least, thank God.
Yeah.
We have to do that.
What a movie. That movie is
weird.
WALL-E, great score.
Sure. Yeah.
I know that score backwards and forwards now.
Yeah, I bet you do. That's the greatness of having a child.
Yeah.
He also wrote the song for Down to Earth for WALL-E with Peter Gabriel, I believe.
Great song. Great song.
Skyfall, Saving Mr. Banks. I mean,
another movie we can not do on our flagship podcast because of Thomas Newman.
Yep.
Bridge of Spies, Passengers. I mean,
again, we can't do Passengers on the flagship because of that.
No, Passengers has multiple nominations. Passengers
really?
is like an art direction nominee for some fucking reason.
Jesus. And then 1917. He's worked with Mendes a lot. He's Mendes's guy. But it's just a fascinating, just what a career.
I remember.
God bless him.
And I still think Angels in America might be his.
I agree. I love his score.
It's insane.
Thomas Newman score. I love Let Them All Talk.
I remember really thinking he was going to win for American Beauty. Obviously, he doesn't.
Sure.
Like, he felt like the favorite there. And then I remember feeling like in the 2000
Violin won that year.
You could see it on my face. I was like,
and then I remember thinking, well, maybe they'll just give it to him for 1917 because he's never won before. And it does feel like there is a narrative developing around how he's never won before. Then they gave it to fucking Joker. And I'm glad there's a woman who's won that award. I'm glad.
I'm conflicted.
Yeah. As a woman, I'm glad.
Once again,
but
our representational desires have handcuffed us in this situation.
As music, it sounds like trying to orally represent a headache, and I'm I don't need this in my life.
Right. How can I can't write to this.
And she's had better scores than
movie
that.
Score has to be. I need to
her
be
score
able to
for Women Talking is a beautiful score, a score that I think she should have won for. But yeah, I mean, it's Thomas Newman's score in this, which is a lot more sort of upbeat and very kind of it's the piano upbeatness of American Beauty, for sure. And then the stuff that I love is his music cues for when she's doing the work, right? Like when she's there's this dun, 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 right? Yeah, there's something very kind of it's great. This movie's also.
Here's my question: how does this movie not just rope Sheryl Crow into writing an original song? I understand. We all listen.
Because every day is a winding road is already good enough.
Winding road. We all had VH1 in 2000. We all saw that music video 8 bajillion times. But like, is this not a slam dunk nomination if Sheryl Crow writes an original?
Okay, but there is a second Sheryl Crow song in it that is clearly like a Sheryl Crow B-side. Like, is that?
No, it's on her album. It's on her. It's on her self-titled.
Yep.
Yeah.
This is her Soak Up the Sun era. And I do feel
this
like
is her self-titled.
Pre-Soak Up the Sun.
Or the Soak Up the Sun era.
Soak Up the Sun is post 9/11.
In terms of what she's writing,
sure.
You know, like, you know what I mean?
Yes,
like if she's going to write a song for this movie, it's going to be,
I see
Erin
what you're
Brockovich.
Yeah,
I took on the lawyers with
okay. So when does her self-titled come out? Forgive me. Now I need to know, like, what
I want to say.
Is it that
the
early?
Globe Sessions? I think is like 98.
It's not self-titled. It's Tuesday Night Music Club. Is the
Tuesday Night is that's yes. Hold on, that's 94. Hold on, I'm pulling up her discography. Right.
Sheryl Crow's 96.
Sheryl Crow's 96. So that's 4 years before this movie.
Yeah.
Globe Sessions is 98. Come on, which has Soak Up the Sun is 2000.
Bangers on it. I gotta say, like,
it does.
Sessions underrated.
Yeah. Favorite mistake? Good fucking song.
This movie, it takes place across 3 years from 93 to 96. Therefore, that is the song that Erin Brockovich canonically would be listening to.
First thing she bought with her bonus check, baby. Sheryl Crow self-titled.
This movie is synonymous with Sheryl Crow.
Ed Masry delivered that new car with the Sheryl Crow CD in the
machine. Yeah.
So she turns on the car and it's just like bear.
It's perfect. It really is. And again, like, I don't feel like Soderbergh is a needle drops guy.
He's not really.
So it is just kind of interesting that he or his music supervisor crush it with Sheryl Crow. It's like, yeah, no, this is definitely Erin Brockovich's theme song is Every Day is a Winding Road.
Yep.
It should have been the tagline on the poster. Every day is a winding road.
I mean, honestly,
it's true.
Also, that was the other thing is when I watched this movie the most recent time, I finally pulled out my Maps app and looked up where Hinckley, California is. That's a fucking hike from Los Angeles. Like, Erin was dedicated to this case. How many times she hauled her ass out to Hinckley? My goodness.
I mean, when when the judge gives gives that indictment at one point, he's like, I'm in Barstow and I'm not that far. I'm like, Barstow's not fucking close by. Like, that's like halfway to fucking Vegas.
And I was gonna say, it's like, I don't think there's like even anything like between there and LA to be like, well, at least you could go to like something. It's not like you're going out towards like Indio or whatever and you can stop in and like, you know, go to a casino or something like that.
No, it's kind of the middle of nowhere. I say that with all due respect, but like I the other thing that I just wanted to note about this film is the sort of the investigative component of it, this sort of almost All the President's Men ishness of it.
Well, it's got a intro character,
It has, but it's got all those beautiful, like, extreme close-ups of text and documents, and that makes you feel very kind of 70s. And when she's doing the digging, and listen, you almost have a microfiche machine, which is really all I need ever in a movie.
Close to having a microfiche scene.
I'm like, you're this close.
Yep.
So that stuff's all really, really wonderful. It should be said, Julia Roberts broke the $20 million barrier for this movie for a woman, first woman to break the $20 million barrier. They cut stuff from it. They shot scenes that they cut. There's a scene where the real Erin Brockovich got quite sick from the toxins that she was exposed to.
Wow.
So there was actually a scene
where she's
sick.
Huh?
Right. And Soderbergh cut it. He's just like, I didn't want us to feel like the protagonist is getting sick. And it felt like she needed to be more, the hero.
I'm glad the stakes were different than that.
Yeah.
My understanding is that Paul Thomas Anderson shot a like whole short film about that dead frog. That just like,
I think he did. Yeah. 100%. That was one of the frogs from Magnolia. So like they're actually in the same cinematic universe, if I'm not mistaken.
I should mention, because Chris loves when I do this, that Ed Masry mentions the fact that the plaintiffs from the Love Canal case are still waiting for their money. Love Canal, Western New York Pride. Get your paws up.
I think that, like, I mean, Soderbergh talked about being influenced by All the President's Men and Rocky, which I think is interesting. There is kind of, I can see the Rocky, the sort of the little guy that's trying to fight, that whole thing. Like, I can kind of see it. in terms of Oscar stuff, very quickly, Steven Soderbergh became the 10th person to direct multiple Best Oscar nominated films in the same year. Can you guys name those filmmakers?
Okay.
Coppola.
Yes.
Yep.
For
Coppola's
the conversation, Godfather Part 2. Some of these are tough. Some of these you're probably just not going to get.
It's got to be William Wyler at some point.
No.
Oh wow.
It's kind of weird because I'm just going to do it because I don't want to put you guys on the spot.
Okay.
But Ernst Lubitsch, 1 Hour with You, and The Smiling Lieutenant in 32.
Okay.
Jack Conway for The Libeled Lady and A Tale of Two Cities in 37.
Oh, The Libeled
Again,
Lady.
I was gonna say that.
Libeled Lady, of course.
Say that. Yeah,
Victor Fleming did it twice. So
Okay.
Victor Fleming did it for Captain Courageous and The Good Earth in 38, and then Gone with the Wind and Wizard of Oz in 40.
Yeah.
Pretty crazy.
Yeah.
Michael Curtiz, Adventures of Robin Hood and the Four Daughters in 39. John Ford, Grapes of Wrath, The Long Voyage Home in 41. And then also in 41, you had Hitchcock with Foreign Correspondent and Rebecca.
Yeah.
And then Sam Wood did it twice for Kitty Foyle in Our Town in 41 and King's Row and The Pride of the Yankees in 43. And then you guys mentioned Christopher Coppola, and the last one is Herb Ross, who did Goodbye Girl and Turning Point in 77.
Yes.
Oh,
yeah.
I referenced that at some point.
We talked about it in our 70s series.
Like it left my head again. Yep.
So many of those are from the era when they had 10 Best Picture nominees. It is wild that it hasn't happened again. You know,
I agree.
Well, so many of those are from the early studio system too. So it's like a lot of those guys are like studio.
Could have happened this year if Luca made 2 good movies instead of one. And kind of a
hot take.
Disagree.
I have not seen Queer yet, but I'm excited to see it. But I don't know. Maybe I shouldn't be.
I do think, like, it's like Spielberg makes 2 movies in a year often enough. It feels like it would have happened with him once.
But it's always like one very serious Oscar movie and then one popcorn movie, and they both end up being like 2 of the best movies of the year. So,
and Herbert Ross, I believe the rule at the time was that he couldn't get 2 director nominations.
Did they change
that? Possible.
I'd have to go back and look at it.
I mean, Emily, you're an actor. This is the thing that directors can do that actors cannot. Actors still cannot get nominated twice in the same category.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Emily and I and Libby
Hollywood,
just
it's discriminating against actors constantly. Just actors can't constantly in Hollywood.
Mm-hmm.
We did an episode on Minority Report for a future miniseries, and we were talking about like Minority Report and Catch Me If You Can in 02, both getting neither Best Picture nomination is kind of insane.
But they're so good. It's such a good.
I agree.
If you have a 10 Best Picture lineup in 1993, Jurassic Park would have also gotten in alongside Schindler's List. So
I think that's probably true. Yeah.
I think that's probably even more likely than both Catch Me If You Can and Minority Report getting through. And if that was a year of 10, but I still think that would have been
looking at the nominees in 2002. I think even in a year of 10, neither of them would have gotten in. Like they were not.
2002 was a good year, but as I discussed, and we will someday do a Catch Me If You Can episode, invariably. But I do think that Catch Me If You Can not making the 5 is still surprising.
I do think it probably would have made it 10. I think Catch Me If You Can maybe makes the 10.
I think
for sure. I don't think both of them.
One of my big pet theories is like having the 10 changes the ethos of everything and makes certain movies like it gives them a leg up. And I think that's definitely like Catch Me If You Can is a textbook example of what I mean. That like if there's a 10 wide Best Picture field, that movie already has an advantage and probably makes it through.
That's a big, like, people think of Spielberg as like a huge Oscar favorite, and so much of that is that like basically every time he makes a movie now he's got a really good shot at a Best Picture nomination.
In the conversation. Yeah, exactly.
Listen, he always will get nominations, but it is amazing how there's going to come a day where he will no longer be on this mortal coil with us. And we're going to be like, we really did that guy dirty for a long time.
The standard for him, though, that's the thing, is the standard is so high for him, like, to surprise people, is that so much of an Oscar narrative goes into like, oh, wow, like we were not expecting, this to be quite this good. It's tough for Spielberg.
That's why it felt like The Fabelmans might be the one to sort of break through there. And obviously it didn't for a variety of reasons, but it was like, finally, Steven Spielberg is talking about himself. And I'm like, he has been all along, but okay.
He has been doing this since
literally every movie.
My Fabelman's opinion is that like that movie maybe wins Best Picture if Spielberg isn't quite so honest about things. Because like the thing about The Fabelmans is he makes this movie about his childhood, and it's just like, what a weird kid you were. Like, wait a second, like, like just like filming your mom's breakdown, and I mean, like all this kind of stuff. And it's just like, it's not quite as, warm and fuzzy, and it's emotional, but not quite in the way that people were really, looking for. I think it's great. I love The Fabelmans.
I love it, but it's him making a Mike Leigh movie.
I love that movie.
I don't know that I'm into this.
My hot take on The Fabelmans is that if Michelle Williams had stayed supporting actress, A, she would have won, and B, she would have gotten the whole movie a better reception. Because I think a big thing that Everything Everywhere All at Once had in its favor is Ke Kwan just kept winning shit. And so it kept putting the movie in people's view. And like, if Michelle Williams is in supporting actress and keeps winning shit, I still think Everything Everywhere wins Best Picture, but I think Fabelmans peels off a couple of those wins from that movie. So
I think Everything Everywhere, a perfect example of a movie that has that surprise factor where people were like,
absolutely,
who saw this coming? Yeah.
I mean, I totally agree with you, Emily, that had Michelle won a bunch of stuff, I still kind of thought that Spielberg and Kushner were maybe going to win screenplay. Like I kind of was like, Spielberg writes so infrequently. It's such a personal thing. I understand that Everything Everywhere was this like crazy wackadoo movie, but like I kind of felt like maybe there was a chance that could happen. Obviously it didn't, but
I had this feeling that night that like if Michelle Williams had won supporting actress, then yeah, they probably would have won screenplay and Williams would have won score. And then you go into like the ending, you're like, oh my God. Yeah, Michelle Williams would have won score.
She did a great score.
And then you go into the last two awards, director and picture, and there's like some real suspense. And I think Everything still wins those.
I agree with that. Yeah. I want to just to get back to Erin Brockovich. There are
Lydia
things
Tarr would have also like won a bunch of awards, like
which would have been the first time that an Academy ceremony conductor also won.
Yes. There are a lot of things, little things in Erin Brockovich that obviously I've watched it many times, but that still kind of hit me. Like when she goes to pick up her kids from the chicken fat lady, and like the disgust that she pulls the kid's hand out of her hair. Like that woman is repelled by these children. Like these little things that just make you go like, it makes you feel kind of gross inside.
I love the first babysitter too. Like that's a great little one. She's trying to sort of make Erin feel better about the fact that she's like, you can get somebody better than just the lady down the street or whatever.
Totally. I also, and I don't obviously know what is improvised and what is not, because I think that Soderbergh is so good at making everything feel so lived in. But the first scene with Aaron Eckhart and her, where she says the number speech, which was that her Oscar clip? Because I don't remember what her Oscar clip was.
I always remember that. I always remember Finney's Oscar clip, which is the one where he goes off on her like, don't tell me that I don't know how to work.
Yes. The most Oscar clip ever. Yes.
But I do think that hers was the numbers clip, because like she doesn't say fuck in that clip. So
and here's what I do remember weirdly is I don't remember what her clip was, but that sounds right. But I do remember that before the clip there would be like a silent thing that they would do. So there was like the moment of her, one of my favorite scenes in the entire movie is her on the phone with him talking about Beth saying her first word. And just Julia doing the whole fucking thing silently of like crying and laughing and smiling. Like she's just like every tool in her belt is in display there. And it's just she's crushing it. So it's like they were like, we have to have a little bit of that somehow and her Oscar clip. So how do we do that? And it feels like they kind of tried to have both. But the first scene with her and Aaron is amazing for a bunch of reasons. Their chemistry obviously is off the charts and they're wonderful. Him falling to his knees.
It's great. It's so great.
I'm like, was that on purpose or not? Because the laughter and the camera setup of the two guys feels like maybe it wasn't planned.
I had that same thought. I also had that thought when after the meeting with the pipsqueak junior staffer lawyer and Masri's super pissed. And he
great gay guy, that actor.
Yes.
and they're shouting at each other, and she's like, why are you yelling at me? And he's like, because I'm pissed. And she goes, good. And he just goes, fuck you. And he says, fuck you back. And then he just starts laughing. And then again, I'm just like, I don't know whether that's just like an end of a scene laugh or whatever, but then they parlay it into him just being like, I really hate you sometimes. It's a great scene. It's a great scene.
It's a great I mean, it's also, I mean, that is, again, not to belabor the point, but like Julia smiling and saying you love me is like her saying it to the audience, right? Like this is just her being like, aren't I just the fucking best? Don't you just love everything I do?
Well, this is
like
the thing.
just like
so many things about Julia Roberts where it's like, and this is sort of what you were saying, Emily, about like the reasons why you might not like it is also the reasons why you would love it, which is that like she's pure movie star in a way where it's like sometimes you're just like, oh my God, these people. But then it's also just like, well, what the hell are we watching movies for if we don't want to watch these people? This is why I always say Julia Roberts' Oscar speech is the best Oscar acceptance speech of all time, because it's the most purely movie star. It is not concerned with false humility. It is
Stick man, I see you.
It is not concerned with, apologizing for yourself. She's like, I'm going to stand here and I'm going to fix my dress so it's pretty, and I'm going to talk for 1 billion hours, and I'm going to like flirt with Danny DeVito, and I'm just gonna like, and I'm gonna, weirdly like play into my grudge with my brother quietly and like thank my sister-in-law, but not thank my brother. Like all of this stuff, it's tremendous. I love it. Yeah.
It is wonderful.
And
what are your thoughts on her Oscar speech, Emily?
I haven't watched it since it aired. I should check it out. I rewatched Steven Soderbergh's Oscar speech today because I was like,
great speech.
I was like, I want to see that moment, and it was I'd forgotten how like sort of surprised he was. Obviously he was surprised because everybody was, but like he is very evidently like, oh fuck, like that's the like expression he has. I think my thing about this movie is I fundamentally don't really care about movie stars. I just don't. I'm just not that interested in them as like a currency. I like great acting, obviously. I love working with actors. I love all of that. But just movie star shit, I just have never been into. I've always been more of a director, writer kind of gal. So, like, obviously, this is a great movie star movie, and that could not be a thing that I care less about.
I also think that and that's totally fair, Emily. I to some degree, I kind of agree with you in the sense that there are movie stars I don't care about, right? The ones that I do, I very much feel invested in to some degree or another. But I feel like right now we're in a bit of a fallow period when it comes to movie stars.
Except for Lydia Tarr.
Lydia Tarr's still crushing it, obviously. Yeah, I mean, yeah, for sure. But I just feel like there is a whole kind of next gen that feels like is kind of bubbling right now and could possibly turn into something really exciting. Basically, the cast of Dune. But like,
I was going to say the only young star who could deliver this performance in 10 years is Zendaya. Like, no one else could do this in 10 years.
Is that like the structures of Hollywood right now are built to combat that. Like the way that Hollywood is structured right now is structured almost as if they want to prevent the creation of a new movie star class. It's crazy.
The people who are in charge of Hollywood right now are millionaire to billionaires who are not interested in sharing that wealth in any capacity and have set up a system that is designed to stop there from ever being another Christopher Nolan, another Julia Roberts. It is like, obviously a big thing that happened in the last 15 years is the Marvel machine, like totally took a bunch of promising stars and like, what's Brie Larson up to right now? Like circumvented them into this thing that they couldn't escape. And now we're kind of coming out of that. So you see the Chalamets and the Zendayas and the Austin Butlers and all of this. And like, but at the same time, are we going to live in a world where Glenn Powell gets to the level of like purchasing power, like people wanting to see him that Tom Cruise was at? I think the system is deliberately built up to keep that from happening.
And the audience is maybe too diffuse at this point also is the thing.
Well, that's its own thing. Just
there is no monoculture.
I mean, it does feel like, you said it, Chris, about the Zendaya of it all. And she does sort of, in this moment right now, feels like someone that actually moves the needle and does feel as though like Gen Z legitimately cares about and would go and kind of see anything she's in right now. And I respect that she's like taking weird swings and making weird movies and, amidst Dunes and what have you. But it doesn't feel likely to me. Glenn Powell in particular, who I quite like, but feel is also a little bit kind of generic good looking guy. Like he's I struggle with his look is ultimately what it comes down to for me.
You don't like that he's attractive. You don't like that my husband is attractive. Okay.
That's not that. No. By the way, let me be very clear. I saw him on the picket lines outside Warner Brothers when we were on strike, and
real one alert.
Stunning individual, like just like he was there with a bunch of the Top Gun people, including what is her name? Who's it? She's in A Complete Unknown.
Monica Barbaro.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Like both of them was just like, you honestly felt like you had to shield your eyes from like just how beautiful they were. So like, I'm not taking anything away from how attractive he is. I just don't know that Hitman showed something, but I'm just not sure that he's totally there yet.
I saw him. I think his philosophy of I need to make a bunch of different kinds of movies to get different audiences on board with is very smart. I saw him in Twisters and leaned over to my wife and said, I would love to marry a man like that and have him beat me up after the Sooners lose.
Oh my God.
I have a very dark sense of humor sometimes. Wow. I just want to be mistreated.
Well, on that note, Erin has this great line that she says to Aaron Eckhart, where she says, are you going to be something else I need to survive? And I do feel like their relationship is perfectly messy to me. And I think part of that obviously is in the direction. Part of it is in just the way their bantery kind ofness, and they're just like that scene with them in bed and him wearing the tiara and like all that stuff just has that very kind of grounded, this feels like these are two real people.
Yeah.
Which I think is rare.
And also then still leaves you with the idea that like, as you mentioned, that like you don't really get this like, button on their relationship where you have this for sure sense that they last or they stay together, because ultimately they may just be two very different kind of people. He may just not be able to be with somebody who is in love with her job, and she's just like, well, here's the thing. Now I found a thing that I'm good at and it makes me feel great about myself, and there's no way I can give that up.
I think it's like the guy that he's probably based on, she ended up divorcing. I do wonder if some of that ambivalence is like inherent to the real story. But you guys obviously didn't see the post-credits scene where he meets up with John Travolta from A Civil Action. And Travolta's like, we got another case over here. Can you take care of some lady's kids for a while?
to your point, Joe, there's that line that Erin says later when he's breaking up with her. And she's like, all I've ever done is spend my life around what men decide they need. Well, not now. And I again, these are all things why I feel like, and you said this, Emily, and I think that it's very true. I feel like a lot of male criticism, film criticism of this movie is coming from stuff like this, of Erin's character being like, I don't need you. Right. I'm fine. I can do this on my own.
When the greatest genre in all of movies is a woman self-actualizing.
Yeah.
Truly the greatest genre in cinema.
Roger Ebert heard her say that and was like, you do need me, Julia. You do need
also your boobs.
And also your boobs are great. I do think that, it comes back to sort of the light touch I was talking about with Soderbergh, where like you can have a moment of George holding a baby at a picnic and see a bunch of bikers go by and like
gazing at the
bikers going by, and like you're like, that's not subtle. If that was in someone else's hands, this would be fucking terrible, and yet somehow you're making this palatable,
Yeah.
I think this is my feeling about the whole star vehicle-ness of it. And the long version that I want to say is like, of course, it's not to diminish her performance in why we love this movie, because like everybody loves this. This is a very beloved performance, but I think one of the things that's made this a movie that has stuck around and has been like very popular, I very much think that this was like one of the pandemic movies for people like Moonstruck that a lot of people revisited because like they love it so much. I do kind of think of this as a director movie as well, and it's never the type of directing that we talk about, where it's like you have that economy of storytelling, you have a trust of the intelligence of the audience. And like it's also that thing of not being an issue movie because like Soderbergh trusts that we're going to get it. He knows that we are going to become emotionally invested in the people of Hinckley in the way that he's telling this story versus the way maybe a studio might want this story to be told. You know, granted, this is
I totally
movie,
agree
you
with
know
you.
what I mean.
Yeah, it's in the like it's in the execution. Like Steven Soderbergh knows the beats. He knows what an audience wants, right? Like he knows how to make a movie that an audience is going to react positively to. And he's kind of bored with it, right? So he's always trying to find a way to make it seem, quite frankly, palatable to him, right? Like he's like, okay, fine. So we're gonna have a scene where her son sees that there's a kid that's also sick, and that's what's gonna make him understand what his mom's been doing this whole time. But I'm gonna do it in this way where like the kid feels like grumpy and kind of shitty about it, and doesn't really like that this is happening, and you know she's like groggy. Like he's doing all this stuff to make it not feel like a studio note, right?
Yeah.
And the end result is that we in the audience watching it watch this movie and it feels very much like his movie.
Yeah.
For me at least.
Not to compare myself to Steven Soderbergh, although I am one of the best directors of all time.
You are.
Yeah. No, like I'm going through this right now because I'm writing a novel I keep describing as romance adjacent. And it's like when you're in a genre like this and the courtroom, I'm going to go and do the courtroom thing and we're going to fight the bad guys and the corporate power. That's a genre in and of itself. You have all the tropes, and the question is, you kind of need to hit them for the story to work. And the question is always, how can I make this 15% different? And I think that Soderbergh nails that here and nails that in Ocean's 11 in a way that is like so gratifying to a mass audience. And you know, when he's on in that regard. And then sometimes he just like is like, I'm gonna go 30%. And you're like, Steve, what the fuck?
Yeah. Well, it's just like he will just sort of just like veer off the path. And sometimes that's great. Sometimes, you know, or even you'll get these movies where like 70% of people are like, this is my shit. And then I'm the one there being like, I don't like Unsane, or like what's the
rewatch Unsane? I hated Unsane and I rewatched it and liked it. Rewatch Unsane.
Really? Okay.
But like
side effects.
Side effects
I don't know about that.
Is fun in a way that like I'm very colored on the fact that I saw Side Effects that had a talk back at the end with Soderbergh and Rooney Mara and the screenwriter. And the screenwriter, literally somebody asked him about like, what made you throw in the lesbian twist at the end? And he literally was just like, I just thought it'd be cool to have a lesbian in this movie. And I'd just be like, in a way that found it very like broy, and found it was just like, or like, you know, that'd be hot or something like that. I'm just like, you sound awful. Stop.
Not great.
That's how I approach every project, though. I'm like, what if there was a lesbian in this?
That's how Catherine
Zeta-Jones. The time Rooney Mara was asked a question, she literally like curled up into a ball in Jude Law's shoulder and like whispered her answer to Jude Law, and he like said it. It was deeply aggravating.
She is. I love. Just to be clear, I love
her too. But like that.
But it's amazing to me how much she does not want to be in the public eye.
Yeah.
It's like, then why are you an actor?
Let's have her
putting
on the
that
pod.
aside,
let's have her on the pod.
I would love to have her. She will definitely not come on our pod.
She could come and talk about Charlotte's
Your
Web.
Sarah Polly connection, Phil. You're Canadian. She's Canadian.
It's true. Yeah. Sarah, could you connect me with Rooney Mara? I to your point though on the Rooney Mara thing, and just because it's an Oscar moment, when Sarah Polly wins the Oscar,
yes,
and she gets up and says, stand up if you were involved in this movie or whatever.
Yeah.
And Jessie Buckley is like ready to stand up and is trying to pull Rooney Mara to stand up. And Rooney Mara's like, fuck off, stop talking. What are you doing?
I have hollow bones. Yeah.
Don't touch my bird bone. So yeah, it was like, I just thought it was a funny moment.
Meanwhile, Frances McDormand's photo is glowering over the stage.
God.
I was going to mention that because Joe, you've made it so that Julia Roberts's photo
I know,
is
laughing at you the entire time. It's great.
In this, yes.
But at least it's a fun photo. It's not her glowering at you.
See, I can just be like, mwah, like kiss
I want to talk about Marge Hellenberger for a second because these scenes
should have been nominated.
Fucking crush me. I cry. I've seen this movie innumerable times.
Yeah.
and she gets me every time. There's two moments. There's the moment when she says, "You have to promise me you're going to get them. You have to promise me," which just kills me. And then the end when she tells her, the settlement.
I love a scene where someone gets a lot of money. If I'm going to exist in a world where capitalism has destroyed and taken so much from me, I'll be damned if I give up the joy of watching a regular person get a lot of money. It's so much fun. I can't wait
till Emily wins a lot of money and we can just put that on camera and someone lists Emily.
Film yourself, Emily, the moment you get a lot of money. And I'll watch
the big settlement. Will you film it?
Yeah,
will you film that?
Absolutely.
Emily?
Absolutely.
It's the best. It's the goddamn best.
It's first of all, I couldn't agree with you more, Joe, that like there's something really lovely about, they won, right? It's satisfying.
Yeah.
But we talked a little bit about this earlier about how there's so many victims of what's going on in Hinckley, right? And I think this movie does a really good job of, yes, Donna is the big one, right? Donna gets the most scenes. Donna is our payoff at the end. Like Donna is the big one. But like the little girl and her parents, it just absolutely kills me.
Annabelle Daniels.
The one who doesn't want Vianne Cox to come around again because she doesn't like her vibe.
yes.
Erin Brockovich is about Vianne Cox's bad vibes.
I only want to win a bunch of money if I win it from Elon Musk. Like I either want.
Then I hope you actually don't win it.
No. I want to like take him to court.
Oh, take it from him. Like, yes. Okay. Yes.
Yeah. I want to I want to be like, Elon Musk, you have wronged me, and then win a paltry amount of money from him, and he'll be so pissy about it.
Yeah, love it. Yeah,
I could be the one. I just want to be the one to come to your house, Emily, and say the judge ordered Elon to give you and your family $5 million.
There you go.
I hope that it is you. I hope that I
will insist upon it. I will find a way.
Joe will go door to door getting 600 signatures and then piss off Vianne Cox by saying that it was 600 blowjobs.
saying.
Can I think that part of the power of these scenes of Erin with these families and these victims comes back to Soderbergh understanding that if I just point a camera at Julia Roberts, the sheer power of her emoting towards and our love of this movie star is going to get us a lot of juice. But also like there's something real. She's doing a bunch of stuff in this movie that isn't just movie star stuff. Like she's actually really acting in this movie.
Mm-hmm. And that's the thing is like there is an undeniably high quotient of you go girl to this movie. Like this is a very you go girl movie. And yet, to me at least, it's sort of guilt-free you go girl, because I feel like the movie does work for it. And in its scenes, the scenes, on a sort of, character to character level feel real. I don't think Soderbergh ever sort of like is untoward in a way he leans on this kind of stuff where I'm just like, all right, Steven, you know what I mean? Like, I don't ever have to, but like in terms of the way this movie was received and kind of marketed, certainly I watched the Oprah episode where they talked about this. I watched Julia lay down the soundbite that, it takes a village to raise this cleavage, and Oprah got the whole audience to cheer and whatever. Sell this movie, man.
Ridiculous.
But like, I think ultimately, I think it's guilt-free, largely guilt-free you go girl for me.
Emily, what are your thoughts on the genre of you go girl movies?
I mean, the best of them is Midsommar. Which
correct.
No,
Slay Diva.
I often find them patronizing. I don't think this one is, but
that's
it's
sort of what I was getting at.
Yeah, it's like, but also like I think Norma Rae is kind of a you go girl movie, and that's wonderful. Yeah. It's very much like if it's
Union go girl.
If it is absolutely. If it's like interested in systemic problems that need more, like that sort of like need pushback, and then it's also like this woman is fighting through misogyny, whatever, to confront systemic problems. Mm-hmm. But it can't just be like I think the movie She Said is perfectly fine, but it's like a movie where it's very much like, oh, the thing we're fighting is misogyny. Actually, a much better example of this is Don't Worry, Darling, which is like a movie where it's like The problem is misogyny. And like there's no real interest in like a larger systemic critique because I think that Olivia Wilde would be implicated by too many of those larger systemic critiques. So like this movie is interested in how corporate America fucks people over. In addition, this is a story about a woman who's underestimated and like overcomes everything. And so those two things work in concert. And also, as a professional haver of boobs, the boobs are good. They're good boobs.
100%.
They are doing. There's a the to speak to Julia's point. There's a lot of work going. Like these bras are pushing them up into like.
This is what she literally
crazy.
She praised the bras. No, 100%. And the other thing is, and I think when watching this movie in 2024, it's not just the like, you know, corporate systemic, you know, vice. It's also the brazenness of this company to be like, we're going to tell you that all of this is good for you, and we're going to do it in a way that we can try and get around the statute of limitations law, which feels incredibly 2024 to me. You know what I mean? Where, like, there's no sense of shame. I feel like that's if there's a thing I say, you know, more often than anything else, I'm just like, bring back shame. 2024,
for real though.
Put shame on the ballot. I want it. We need it. We got rid of too much of it. I
also just wanted to say too that on the Silkwood of it all, you know, we have this Embry character who's sort of like looming around sort of the back half of the movie and certainly has this vibe of, is he going to assassinate her? Is he going to attack her? Is this guy a crazy person?
On the phone that threatens her. Yeah.
Is he just like, another person ogling
is
her?
He just right? Is this what is this exactly? And then it turns out obviously that he's been grappling with his own moral code and all of this and decides to give her.
Still a little
totally
weird, yeah.
Still, and his word choices are questionable.
Yeah,
but ultimately, yeah,
it works out.
This is why when a random man comes up to you in a bar and says threatening things, you should hear him out, and you should be like,
"Do you have incriminating documents?
Do you have incriminating documents?" And he'll be like, "I do. You got me."
It is like, I mean, I would say that this movie, on sort of like, if we were to board this movie and see it sort of all the various sort of plot points, this is the clunkiest, I would say, or very sort of like, it's a little too easy that he just happens to give her everything she needs when she needs it.
Yeah.
So, you know, I bump on that a little bit, but also
this is a function of the fact that like she was constantly in that community. I think one of the things that the movie, you know, I love the scene where she and Masri are there explaining to the people in their living room why it's good, and they're like, you want to stick around for pound cake and coffee? And Masri's like, we gotta go. And she's like,
have a fucking cup of coffee, Ed.
Have a fucking cup of coffee, Ed. And it's just like, yeah, that's sort of her superpower. It's just like, she knows that like, to get the trust of this community, she can't fake it. She actually has to like, you know, embed herself.
It's also a place where like Soderbergh's touch is so necessary, because there is a version of that scene that is like, well, women have to put up with this shit so they can get, and it's like, it steers clear of that at every turn, even though as scripted, it kind of is that. And like, I think my sort of, my feelings on this film are that like the first 45 minutes are basically perfect and impeccable, and then as it gets closer to the end, it has to take more sort of storytelling shortcuts, and this is the biggest one. So
it kind of needs to wrap things up, and it's moving through time very quickly as well. We kind of lose track of where things are. Like, we have a time jump in the middle that's about 9 months or something like that.
I like the use of Beth to sort of track that.
Sure.
I mean, I think ultimately, you know, it gets you the happy ending that you're looking for, and it gets you there a little bit quicker. This movie is not particularly long. I think it's well paced. It's like a little over 2 hours long. Like, I think that if it was made today, it would probably be longer, or a fucking limited television show.
That's I always fear that. Yeah,
but I do think that, and I'm curious as to what you all think of, like, this movie was a huge success, not just because it made a bunch of money, but it also got an Academy Award. What are the movies that you think were sort of pulling off of this movie? Because like, I feel like there were a lot of sort of, I mean, I guess North Country is sort of in that vein, right? Like, there's other movies that feel like it's right, like Oscar Beatty movies like this.
Any movie that kind of wants
example.
Yeah, like I think the movies that maybe tried to follow in the mold of this movie didn't, take the lessons of tone that this movie has,
Yeah. Well, even something like, it's not the same thing, but like something like Rendition, which is a movie that only our podcast ever talks about, where it's sort of just
Rendition.
like Reese against the system. And, she's, I'm trying to think of, because like the key ingredient of this is that like it's this like, super, super A-lister, right? And it's, so like who are the people who would, they would plug into movies like that? It's, your Reese
Well, it's
Witherspoons
interesting
and
because
Sandra Bullocks and Hilary Swanks and
no, for sure. I Googled movies like Erin Brockovich, and what's come up are Joy, which I think is kind of interesting.
Hmm.
I
That's
don't
a
like
movie
Joy at
about
all.
mops.
it is.
Dark Waters
She
is
goes
the most
up against
obvious
Big
one.
Mop.
Yeah.
She does go up against Big Mop. Dark
Dark
Waters
Waters is definitely a thing.
Yeah.
is in that sort of milieu. But the Judge, love the Judge.
I think like the problem is the
Mhm.
story of Erin Brockovich is so uplifting.
Mhm.
There's the big win at the end. If you're going to do North Country, if you're going to do Rendition, the issues in Erin Brockovich are obviously very serious, but they're also kind of abstract. They're depersonalized. It is a massive corporation hurting people in ways that are visible.
Hurting lots of people.
Hurting lots of
Mhm.
people. They get cancer, but it's a lot of people, and they're kind of abstracted a little bit. Something like North Country, it's like, here's a very distinct issue that is affecting certain people in a certain way, and we're going to dramatize that. Something like Rendition is like, you can't make a breezy movie about that topic. Or what's is it, The Program, the Scott Frank one with the about torture, with Diane Feinstein?
Oh no, that's
The Report.
The Report.
Yep.
There we go. And it's just like, that's another movie where it's like, that can't really be breezy because you're talking about something too serious.
What's another bad one? The Life of David Gale.
Yes.
That's
Yes.
one where, like,
Yes,
Kate Winslet
yes.
is a reporter. She's going to try and like beat the death penalty, and it's so bad.
Yeah.
No, you're absolutely right that there's something about this specific story, Emily, that allows it to sort of be executed this way.
I think the closest thing to this is Spotlight, which is
Mhm.
another movie that is very watchable, with nails a tricky tone. It does have some humor in it, mostly from these characters like working together, has some nice movie star moments, but it's a very big ensemble movie. So I don't know that you'd think of it as like an Erin Brockovich alike.
Did it win the SAG award for ensemble that year?
Spotlight, probably.
Yeah.
Let's find out.
Yes, I'm pretty sure it did.
I think it
because I remember that happened, like that being a I think that speech talked about the real life victims of that true story, and I remember being like, people being like, oh, that's that's the hook that I think they're gonna
Spotlight won
at the Oscar voting.
Yeah, Spotlight defeated Beasts of No Nation, The Big Short, Straight Outta Compton, and Trumbo.
Beasts of No Nation, I believe, another SAG ensemble nominee with only 3 nominated.
Yeah, it was very few people.
Are you serious with Trumbo?
Listen,
Trumbo came very close to getting a lot more Oscar nominations.
Sure did.
This industry.
Sure did.
So to obviously we're going to rate this movie in a second, but I'm curious, Chris and Joe, as to what of the 5 nominees would have been your pick for Best Picture.
For Best Picture?
Mm-hmm. In 2000. Just to be clear.
I think mine, so we again revisited this with a Vanity Fair podcast somewhat recently. The last time I watched Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, I think, and I've always liked that movie, but I was just like, this is the
majestic
thing. Certainly of the, like, I adore Erin Brockovich, and that's like a strong second place for me, but like there's some magic in Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon that I really, really love.
Chris?
At the time, I remember being pretty crabby about this lineup because like this is maybe the year of disillusionment for me with like I'd become someone who is into Oscar and like this is the year that it's like, no, teenage boy, Dancer in the Dark is never in any universe gonna be a Best Picture nominee. Like
but
it's not gonna happen. You have to learn this lesson the hard way. At the time, I probably was a Crouching Tiger voter. I would probably be an Erin Brockovich voter now. But I'm pretty sure I had some of the same ambivalences toward Traffics that I have now, but I definitely don't appreciate Erin Brockovich. I appreciate Erin Brockovich way more than I did at the time. Though I mean, I love the movie, but just like what makes this movie great, I think I understand better now, or like I have a better formed opinion about it now.
This is one of those years where if you could take the movies that were maybe in the 5 to 10 range, and like that's also maybe a banger lineup where it's like you could do a lineup of Almost Famous, You Can Count on Me, Castaway,
Billy Elliot, maybe.
Probably Billy Elliot.
Totally Billy Elliot. I love that movie. And throw in, I don't know, uh Before Night Falls. Sure, why not?
Sure.
Patriot.
The Patriot, obviously. Emily, I know that for you, it's Crouching Tiger for sure.
Crouching Tiger all the way. Yeah.
At the time, it was Traffic, correct?
At the time, it was Traffic. I think. Yeah. Yeah. I'm interested to rewatch Gladiator. That's the only one we haven't done at this point.
Yeah.
And like, because most of these I hadn't seen since theaters.
Interesting.
It's in fact all of them. Now that I rewatched Crouching Tiger. Yeah, I've rewatched Crouching Tiger over the years. Crouching Tiger to me is one of the great movies. I think right now I would have this movie second by a hair over Traffic. I like them both about the same now. I think they both have very different flaws and very different strengths, but they're both like worth watching. I think I have a friend who's like the world's biggest Steven Soderbergh fan.
Sure.
And for years and years and years and years and years, she has been like, Erin Brockovich is his worst film. And I'm like, I don't know if that's true. And she's like, but it's still 3.5 out of 5. And I'm like, okay. And watching her Letterboxd score on Erin Brockovich slowly creep up has been weirdly gratifying to me. I think she still has it very middle of the pack, but she's like a fucking Soderbergh super fan. So
saying that The Good German is better than Erin Brockovich is some sort of a crime as far as I'm concerned.
I'm gonna go look up what her score is for The Good German. Hold, please.
Please do.
My question is
saying that Full Frontal is better than Erin Brockovich is
Bubble.
Bubble's not bad, but it's no Erin Brockovich. What happens though if Erin Brockovich, the character, on her way to Hinckley, stops in a small town in California and opens a chocolate shop in the middle of the desert? And they're like, lady, you can't build a chocolate shop in the desert. Everything will melt. And she's like, watch me. And it inexplicably works.
Watch me and my daughter.
Were gonna link
magic.
I thought you were about to link Soderbergh's and you were going to be like, what if Erin Brockovich goes on vacation to Tampa? And
I want to, I mentioned this a little bit on our Traffic episode, but I think it's worth mentioning again on this because, and this might sound like a crazy thing to say but I actually think that this movie is better directed than Traffic. I think that Traffic is,
I think I agree.
It's showier. I know that he obviously photographed it himself, and I like Traffic.
Yeah,
for sure. I'm not against him winning for Traffic, just to be clear.
Right.
But this movie, I think, is deceptively harder. I think that the directing of having, as I said, this light a touch, the influences to work within this kind of studio sandbox and execute something like this that could be very fucking milquetoast into something this good, I actually think is a harder task than Traffic, which looks globetrotty and whatever, but like, I don't know what you guys think about that.
There is something about Traffic that, especially on the rewatch that I just did of it, that it was really striking of how formative it is and how much
Emily talked about this.
So many movies were chasing what that movie did, and it just informed so much style, taste, decisions, choices, creative, whatever. But I do think I agree with you, maybe even more strongly than you feel it. And it's all of the things you said, but I think there's also an element of like, there is a real creative stamp on this movie. I think that, you just don't expect from a movie like this. And maybe that's like our, maybe culturally, like we should expect like someone to come in and be able to elevate something a little bit more the way that Soderbergh does with this movie.
I found my friend's Soderbergh rankings, and she has
okay.
Erin Brockovich dead in the center. So there you go.
Okay.
Which is like a big triumph her.
Yo, for sure,
she's-
considering that it was at the
direction.
bottom.
The needle's moving in the right
Yeah,
way.
she's very into his more experimental side. So like,
What
you
is
know,
her least now? Just out of curiosity.
least is, let's see here, the laundromat.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
fair. That's fair.
Yeah.
bad. Yeah.
I mean, I don't know that it's as I still would argue that The Good German's a worse movie than Laundromat, but
I went and found her review. I went and found her review of The Good German, and she's like, "This is a really scathing condemnation of post World War II American foreign policy." And I'm like, "I'm glad you see it that way." So she does.
Your friend sounds like a lot.
She does have Erin Brockovich over The Good German. So
okay,
yeah.
that's important.
But her number one Soderbergh is Schizopolis, which I don't think is
I still
true
have
of
to
anybody
see,
else.
like,
That's
That
such a
communicates
like.
a lot. That communicates a lot. That tells me a lot.
She's great. She's wonderful.
No,
That's
listen.
great.
Takes all kinds.
I do just very quickly just wanted to say, Emily, you on the Traffic episode, you talked a lot about how that movie became sort of the template for so many kind of issue-driven ensemble movies, to just be reductive about it to some degree. And it's interesting because I watched Nashville for the first time, which I hadn't seen. I watched it a couple weeks ago. And I bring this up just to say, like, I imagine that movie.
One of my all
I
time.
one of
love
the
Nashville.
greatest ever.
It was incredible. Loved it. Loved every second of it.
Your brain grew that day.
Yeah, I was like, and I'm thinking, like, when that movie's in theaters, that movie must have broken people's brains about what an ensemble could do as well, right? Like, what obviously Altman was at the tip of the spear of all of that, right? And I'm just sort of curious as to, like, is Traffic to kind of the Nashville of the early 2000s in terms of like changing the metrics of an ensemble?
I think so. Yeah, I think that it is what we have now. Like,
yeah,
everything is Traffic, especially if it's about an issue. But like Avengers Endgame is Traffic. Like, genuinely, it is structured in a similar fashion.
Yeah.
By the way, Phil, my friend's number 2 is Solaris, so I feel like you two would get along.
I love Solaris.
Right.
Solaris is
Solaris
so
fucking
good.
I was talking with Libby yesterday. I think his run from Out of Sight through Solaris is as good as a director's ever been, but I do like Full Frontal more than most people. So
Solaris fucking rules.
Full Frontal is one of those movies that I dog on because, like, I dog on like that era of like
Digital
video filmmaking, just the look of it. I should go back and watch Full Frontal because I'm the type of person that I'm like, oh no, that's a masterpiece. That's great. Like I will.
It does feel like that. Yeah, that you would be more inclined to just be like
actually
wrong about Full Frontal. Here's why.
I also, I mean, not to belabor the Soderbergh conversation, but I do think that like what he's done in the last like decade or so is also really fascinating. I mean, the Logan Lucky, Unsane, High Flying Bird, The Laundromat, Let Them All Talk, No Sudden Move, Kimmy, Magic Mike's Last Dance. That's a fascinating run of movies, right? Like they don't all click, but like I think Kimmy's fucking great. Looking Lucky's great. Let Them All Talk is great.
High Flying Bird is so good.
I forgot.
The lesson also is that like you can just like say you're retired and not ever retire.
Well, that's
and,
true.
like, everybody can just be like, well, like look at all these movies he made, and he's not even a working director. It's crazy.
I forgot that Steve took 2003 off. So I think this is the run. I think this Out of Sight, The Limey, Erin Brockovich, Traffic, Ocean's 11, Full Frontal, which again I like more than most people. Solaris. He takes 2003 off. His next movie is Ocean's 12, which is one of my favorites of his movies.
It's great.
So it's that's a great run. Then he makes Bubble, and it's over. It's done. He's dead.
Well, Bubble, Good German, Ocean's 13, Che. I mean, it's weird, but I love The Informant. I love Contagion. I think, like Magic Mike's great. Like he's just, God bless him. And then every year he gives us a list of everything he's read, listened to, and watched.
And he'll just be like, you know what I'm going to do now? I'm going to release my edit of like some fucking movie that like he says, I'm going to release my edit of E.T., but I'm going to replace E.T. with like an animated GIF of like, and you're like, okay. Sure.
We did an episode with David Sims on the Limey for the 99 podcast back in the day. And we were talking about, because I think that movie is so key. Like that is the skeleton key to Steven Soderbergh, if you ask me. Like he shot that movie, he edited it, and he said, this movie fucking sucks. How do we like break this into a million pieces and take pieces of some other movie that Terrence Stamp was it? Like, I think the rubber met the road for him in that moment. that I think changed, like that is a fulcrum point for him as a filmmaker, because yes, okay, he follows it up with Erin Brockovich, but like the Limey and it's like Out of Sight and Erin Brockovich are a pair, and the Limey and Traffic are a pair. Like those are the two sides of Steven Soderbergh, which I just think is really interesting. He's a great guy.
Not to date this episode, but Bernie Sanders is currently talking to an animated cat on Twitch. So,
oh, that's cool. What cat?
It's a streamer who like does like one of those AI overlays, so they appear to always be a cat.
I love that you think that would date this. That happens all the time. I
mean, yeah.
He's gonna pivot to Twitch.
Yeah.
So to rate this movie, I saw this film in 2000. I loved it in 2000, but I also think, similar to what we said at the beginning, that like I was like, yeah, that was good. I think I probably would have given it like an 85. I was like, this is a really good movie. I had a really good time. And I would even argue that by the end of that year, I was way more in the tank for the movie than I was in March when I saw it in theaters. Like, I think that I was just sort of whatever about it. Now I honestly think I'm at like a 94 or 95. Like, this movie is so imminently rewatchable. Like, it's just, I could have this on once a week and be very happy.
Yep.
So that's where I'm at. Where are you, Joe? Where were you in 2000 and where do you think you are now?
So when I first saw this movie, I remember I sort of towed the party line with everybody saying, Erin Brockovich, good, Traffic, great, you know, that kind of a thing. I was very much like, well, you know, you can, you know, if you want to have a popcorn movie, you go see Erin Brockovich. But if you want to see a film,
right,
asshole that I was in college. No, but I feel like when I logged this week, I'm like, this has to be like my 20th time watching this movie, counting like partial viewings on television or something like that, where you catch it halfway through and it's on TNT and you're like, well, this is where I'm going to be for the next, 70 minutes or whatever that's left in the movie. And I feel like I would say that it's fair to say that every single time I've watched it, either in full or partially, my rating has gone up a point. So I feel like if I started around like a 75, I'm at a 95 now, and that's just math. That's just mathematics. You can't argue with math. So
absolutely. What about you, Chris?
I realized in like doing the Oscar research for this episode, I think my holdout when I first saw it was this movie opens the week before the 1999 Oscars. So it's like, I saw it, loved the movie, but like my mind was occupied and busy. So like, I didn't even really like, and I'm a teenager. So like my mind thinking
Benning or Swank.
Basically. And, I didn't really consider it enough on the level of greatness, the way that now, if I saw a movie this good in March, I'm on cloud fucking 9. So like, I definitely probably would have been like 80 when I first saw it, or like 85. And now I'm probably like you, 94, 95.
Yeah.
You loved this movie, but you were so distracted with your skywriter you'd hired to write "Good Night, You Princes of Maine, You Kings of New England." That was the like.
That was basically it. Yeah.
That was the radicalizing Oscar year for me, because I was so into being John Malkovich, and then it lost, and so I guess I have to rate this movie. I would say that in 2000 I was a bit of a grumpy goose about this movie. I probably would have given it the 75, straight down the middle, 3 out of 4.
Sure.
I think I am higher now. I don't remember what I gave Traffic. I want to give it like 2 points higher than Traffic, but I think I'm going to say like 87.
That's fair.
It's a very good movie that's just not like in my wheelhouse, but I can respect everything it's doing well.
Can I ask? Just one last Oscar question, since we obviously have the top of the mountain when it comes to Oscar stuff with you guys.
We do tabulate the votes every year, and then don't.
You do it. Is there? I'm trying to think of a locked in Oscar win. Like, this was so locked in, so hard, so early.
So early in the season. Yeah.
No real active competitor.
There was never, I mean, yes, there were obviously the Emilys of the world that were hoping that Ellen Burstyn was going to pull out for Requiem for a Dream, a harrowing film that maybe 5 Academy voters probably actually sat through. this performance, Julia Roberts in this role felt so inevitable.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, we have inevitable other performances since, but like this feels like it's on some. Am I crazy for thinking that it's like on another level?
To have opened in March and have it feel that way, yeah. I think last year you had something like Robert Downey Jr., where it was sort of like once Oppenheimer opens,
Right.
I'm like, well, nobody else is winning supporting actor. Like he's got this. But that
But
was
don't you
what
think that's more common
summer.
with supporting?
Oh, sure. I definitely think
Okay.
that that's definitely true.
But there were probably also more like second place was probably closer for Robert
Right,
against
right.
Robert Downey Jr. than it was for Erin Brockovich. You mentioned Oppenheimer, and it's like my closest example. The first thing that came in my mind isn't even a performance, but it's Christopher Nolan.
Yeah.
Like there was no
Yeah.
active challenger
Sure.
at any point.
Well, yeah. I mean, Oppenheimer felt inevitable that it was going to be. We've had movies like that. I guess I'm just trying to think of because of Julia Roberts' fame at that time, right?
Mhm.
Like it ultimately, I'm trying to think of someone that big a movie star with planting a flag that deep in Best Actor or Actress feels just
I don't.
kind of unheard of. But
It
maybe
is.
Emily, you have one.
Hanks and Forrest Gump comes close. You know what I
Sure,
mean?
sure.
With one of those things. But yet again, that's a summer movie. It's not a spring movie. Yeah.
Even there, it was like people were like, "Well, he won last year.
Right. And they're
Somebody's
like,
going to come
maybe
along and take
Travolta.
it."
Yeah, yeah,
You
yeah.
know.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I think there was a similar thing with DiCaprio, but that came out in the
Yes.
winter.
Yeah.
But it
Yeah.
did feel like in June, everyone was like, "Well, he's going to win Best
People
Actor."
a year ahead of
Right.
time were like,
Yeah,
he's got this. He's,
yeah.
crawling in the middle of dead animals and whatnot. And
And
yeah.
that was the thing you see that's sort of similar to Roberts, where the other nominees with her were frequently very similar. There were a couple like differences here and there, but like with DiCaprio, it was like he just dragged the same group of guys with him because everyone was like, well, he's winning, so who cares who else is nominated? So that's how
Right.
Bryan Cranston's nominated for Trumbo, which I think is an actively bad performance. So
Yeah.
Yes, it is.
He did
Well,
sit in
Eddie
a
Redmayne
bathtub
and the
and
Danish
type.
Girl. That's a famously sort of weak Best Actor class where you're like, if you take DiCaprio out, like who even wins that? I've sort of made the argument that like we'd have talked ourselves into Matt Damon for The Martian, maybe, but like it still
yeah,
doesn't feel real.
Yeah.
I think that's I really was like, well, Michael B. Jordan's going to get in for Creed, and then like, yeah, it's just like
Mhm.
they do not care enough because
Yeah.
DiCaprio's going to win, so they're just like, here's the five guys,
Yeah.
and like
Okay. Yeah.
if Jordan gets, I do think if DiCaprio's not around, then like Michael B. Jordan gets in for Creed, you have like it's
Then
more
all of a sudden it's a
dynamic.
different conversation
Yeah,
entirely. That's the thing
Mhm.
is sort of because I've written a lot of these for Vulture, these sort of like alternate history, like what if this happens? What are the like, butterfly effect implications or whatever? And sometimes it's just like when you take one element out of a conversation, it's not just like next one up and everybody moves one
Yeah.
rung up the ladder, is the conversation can
yeah.
just like completely change. And
Well,
Mhm.
because a
speaking of
lot of the
that,
times it's just like, what's the story we want to tell this year?
I just
well,
And
because like,
I'm
yeah, sorry.
imagining a version of The Revenant where DiCaprio comes in and he's all like serious and he talks like Goofy from like
Sure.
Disney, and
Or
it's
like
just like,
Robert Pattinson
oh
in Mickey 17.
gosh, yeah. Oh, that's good. That's going to be one of our
It's gonna be
finest,
incredible.
performances.
So speaking just very quickly, you look at the best actor category in 2000, right?
Mhm.
You mentioned, Emily, that was Russell Crowe not nominated for something? You
He
said that
was
he was.
nominated at SAG, but he lost to Del Toro.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. Sure.
It
But
was,
like
yeah.
the other nominees, Javier Bardem for Before Night Falls, Tom Hanks for Castaway, Ed Harris for Pollock, and Jeffrey Rush for Quills.
Yeah.
I mean, none of these other nominees had a shot.
Well, actually, in my memory,
Hanks.
Okay.
there was a lot of talk of like if Tom Hanks didn't already have two Oscars, he would be
Sure.
walking away with this one.
Yeah.
And I also remember that like when Crow won,
Yeah.
he did walk up. Part of his speech, I'm pretty sure it was the Oscar speech, when he was like, "If I had money, I was gonna put it on Javier Bardem to win this," because there was a little bit of a sense of um Russell Crowe's going to get this next year because people already knew that A Beautiful Mind was already sort of lined up as like this massive Oscar bait movie.
As soon as he won, there was talk of like, is he gonna pull the Hanks and win 2 years in a
sort of
row?
how
God.
Nicole Kidman, when she won for The Hours, and people were like, they might give it to Renee because Nicole's got Cold Mountain coming next year. You know what I mean? And it's just like people are sometimes willing to sort of kick that can down the road. I think ultimately Crow wins because Bardem's still pretty new for American audiences by that point. Hanks had won twice. Harris getting the nomination was pretty much enough, and they were giving Marcia Gay Harden an award for supporting actress anyway. And then
It's crazy.
Quills was just a movie that just like, I don't know how many people actually saw Quills. And
Wait, you don't think Quills made an impact? Everyone talks about Quills still to this day.
Your noted Quills defender is here in the chat.
I know, you are
I think it's a fun movie. It's not.
No, I've seen it. I liked it fine when I saw it back
shit
then.
on the walls. They're not going to give somebody an award for that. Like,
no. There is the factor of he's the only Best Picture nominee. He's the only one nominated in a Best Picture nominee.
That is true. That is true.
Gladiator pulls ahead in Best Picture, so it makes sense that he pulls ahead.
It's very much a here's the new movie star. It's that kind of way.
Well, and now in retrospect, you look back and you're like, well, of course. Like, what it would have been insane to give it to anybody else. Although I still think that Hanks is so fucking good. And
Hanks would get my vote.
Yeah,
there's also a lot of.
Ruffalo gets nominated for "You Can Count on Me" and walks away with it because Ruffalo's astounding.
He's incredible in that.
Movie, but like,
I also feel like, I mean, in '99 you had Crow for The Insider, which a lot of people think should have won. I really like him in that movie, and I certainly would have given it to him over Kevin Spacey, and that's even prior to everything Kevin Spacey. I think Kevin Spacey.
That everybody thought Denzel was going to win for The Hurricane.
Yeah. Right, which is interesting considering that The Hurricane. It's not a very good movie. Spoiler. It's fine, but it's not great.
Yeah.
The person who should have won, in my opinion, is Richard Farnsworth for The Straight Story. He's
my vote.
Absolutely. I mean, that's
a secretly
the
really strong
of that
year for that category.
Yeah. It really is. And so a lot of people think he wins for Gladiator as some rollover from him not getting it for The Insider, which I don't think is entirely true, but there might be something to it.
I mean, at best, he was third place that year.
There was an element of they spend the next several years of Best Actor awarding people from that year when Kevin Spacey won. I had a bit of a different take on the category in '99. I would have given it to Michael Caine for The Cider House Rules, and I also would have given supporting actor to Michael Caine for The Cider House Rules. I would have had him win both.
Well, because one is for the Princes of Maine, the other is for the Kings of New England.
Right.
That movie is such dog shit. It's unbelievable. Like we obviously.
You talk about The Defender has clocked in. I liked The Cider House Rules at the time. I've not seen it in a while, and I don't know how I would think.
You should rewatch it. You should rewatch it. I think 2024 Joe Reid might.
I bet it hits different in post Dobbs America.
I bet it hits different in a lot of ways.
Definitely a movie. When I saw it in high school, I was like, 3.5 stars, fine. And I would John Irving has written truly some of my favorite books. I really love him as an author. I still don't think he should have an Academy Award for adapting Cider House Rules. I think it's bonkers.
Wait, does that movie come down against being an abortion? I guess because Tobey Maguire decides to not become an abortionist. Is that the idea?
I think it's pro-choice. I don't think it ends being.
So. I feel like
very much, like a. What if we had more kindly abortionists? How would you feel then?
Yes.
Listen.
Yeah.
Maybe that's.
What if we still used ether?
Yeah.
As effective today as it was back then. So let's just say that.
Are you promoting ether right
now? Hear me out, guys. I've got this great new product.
Joe's been hanging out with the party gays too much.
It's the multi-level marketing sensation.
That is incredible.
I remember as someone who was like very conservative pro-life at the time, going to see that movie because I saw all the Oscar movies and being like, they sold it as like glossy whatever, and then they were like. And then the first scene is Michael Caine being like, see this? I'm giving abortions all the time.
Incest.
It's like literally scene 2 is Tobey Maguire like taking a little pot with an abortion in it.
And to be clear, I'm very much pro abortion rights. I think everyone should be all the abortions they want.
Clear, Emily is
whether or not Tobey Maguire is administering them.
I mean, when we did that episode with Eric Anderson, we did that episode back in the day on 99 podcast, and I mean, watching that film, I was just like, that movie's crazy. Outside of being just like
a John Irving story is gonna be crazy,
always pretty out there.
But
you're just watching it being like, what the fuck is this movie? Truly crazy. You guys are the best. Can you plug your podcast? Would you please tell us all about your podcast?
Yeah,
so people can hear it and
take
such?
her away.
We host a show called This Had Oscar Buzz. You can check us out wherever you find your podcasts. We talk about basically failed awards bait movies, movies that managed to score 0 nominations, though at some point, whether they were positioned for Oscars, critics were talking about them for awards, etc., but managed to get no nominations. We're also on Patreon talking about movies that, have the stench of failure on them, but managed a nomination or two. This had Oscar Buzz wherever you get your podcasts.
And
Emily, you've been on this you've been on their podcast.
I did Moby
right?
Dick. I desperately want to come on to do either All Too Well, the 10-minute short film, or In Good Company.
We should actually do All Too Well.
You need to do All Too Well. You need to do that.
No, they will find us and they will end our show. They will find us. We will never be able to produce another episode ever again.
I'm sure everybody asks you this, but I have to ask, who do you think, just we're so far out from it, who's winning Best Picture? Just your November 20 whatever year this is, 2024 prediction.
The Brutalist. I'm going to say The Brutalist.
Chris.
Anora. Today, you ask me today, it's Anora.
Yeah.
I think it's between those two, and I think it's going to be, A24 versus Neon. They've kind of really.
It's all been up to that.
I'm more cemented on Jacques Audiard as winning Best Director than I am.
Interesting.
Best Picture.
You've been banging this drum for a while. I want Demi Moore to be nominated for Best Actress.
Oh, seriously, so do I.
I do.
And I want a makeup nomination for The Substance. Nothing would make me more happy. All I want is
it not.
I want gross makeup nominees. This is all I want. Yeah. Listeners of our show will tell you I probably talk about this every episode. I want gore in the makeup and hairstyling.
You want to talk about a movie that had an Erin Brockovich style critical being like, but there's so many asses. It's The Substance.
It is. It's true. It's true.
That is butt cinema. I'm going to use that as a segue to tell people why they should subscribe to my Demi Moore podcast, though, because
which I can't wait to be on.
I'm going to have both of you fine folks.
Hell yeah!
My podcast in not till 2025, but it's going to happen. Phil, you're going to be on to talk about The Juror. Emily, you're going to be on to talk about G.I. Jane, which is like low key the episode I'm most looking forward to.
Oh my god, Emily, you're going to crush that. I'm sorry, you said you wanted to go on for All Too Well, and what was the second thing you wanted to go on?
In Good Company, a movie I really love.
Sure. Yes, I mean, yes.
It's just so you can.
You're both welcome whenever you want on the show.
I'm very excited to discuss Dennis Quaid's politics. I'm very excited to discuss what if your 17-year-old daughter started dating your new boss. But also, like, I was writing a scene in a book to The Trapeze Swinger the other day, which is a song that I think is a little bit much, but I looked it up. It was written for that film that it wasn't nominated. It's kind of mind-blowing. Yeah.
So you said In Good Company, but my brain heard In the Company of Men.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
I'd also gladly do the Altman, The Company, which I think is a very good movie.
All of those things had Oscar buzz in some way or another.
They all did, which is pretty crazy. Our listeners can listen to me defend Elizabethtown on your podcast if they choose to do that.
That is true. That is true.
Come defend something
my
else
appearance
too.
on their podcast.
I'm not booing you. I'm booing Elizabethtown.
He's not booing. He's saying Drew Baylor.
He's actually saying shoes.
Yeah, I know. I was gonna say I have my Stingray shoes right here on my foot.
Yeah. Well, I mean, God. But yes, thank you so much for coming on. You guys are the best. Next week we are talking Traffic with Carson Betts and Carolyn Thompson, which was a really fun episode, which we've recorded already. What is the name of their podcast, Emily? Forgive me.
How have you not seen?
Right. I was going to fuck that up. So I appreciate you doing that. Which is, they had never seen Traffic. So it was super fun to talk with them about that. Cool. And talk more Soderbergh and more Oscars. Emily, you look like you have something to say.
It appears Mark Hamill has joined the Bernie Sanders Twitch.
Is he voicing the cat?
Is he the cat?
No, the cat's a girl. Cat's very pretty.
Mark Hamill's career has reached a really fascinating place these days.
I have one last question for our Oscar prognosticators in regards to the upcoming Oscars. I have not seen Conclave.
Nor I.
Could that be an Oscar player in a real
It's gonna get. Here's my prediction for Conclave. Will be nominated for Best Picture. It'll probably get like 2 to 4 other nominations, but it's not gonna win anything. That'll be my
Focus Features has never won Best Picture.
That's kind of a bummer. Yeah. Brokeback Mountain was the moment.
Closest. Yeah.
I think they did like international releasing for something that won, but they've never domestically distributed a Best Picture winner.
I mean, it felt like The Holdovers last year had real like, I don't know that it was ever going to win Best Picture, but it felt like
in a non-Oppenheimer year, it could have made a run for it. Yeah.
I'm excited to see Conclave. I'm seeing it this weekend. It looks like bitchy priests. I'm there for it.
It's not that. Yep. It's not that. Yep.
So we were talking about this a little bit before we got on mic, but it's such a crazy year of like, there's really nothing that feels like a front runner or even really close to a front runner. Like I saw Blitz the other night, which felt like the only one that hadn't really screened much, and it's good, but like, it's not that movie.
I've heard a spectrum of reactions to Blitz, from like it's disappointing to it's great. So I'm eager to sort of like see where I fall on that spectrum.
I was initially highly skeptical about this as an awards movie, the movie I'm about to mention, but I mean, not a Best Picture winner.
Sure.
Nosferatu looms, and I would not be surprised if that gets more Oscar nominations than we might normally expect.
Yeah. I'm excited for that. I also love the fact that we've got Nosferatu, Sinners, and now people are speculating that the Chris Nolan movie is a movie from the 1920s about vampires.
Oh,
so
wait, which one is Sinners?
That's the Michael B. Jordan.
Yeah.
It's
the Ryan Coogler.
Period piece about vampires. Apparently, that's all the rage.
I can't remember what I was watching that had a very limited advertisement range, and it was literally an ad for it. That movie at every single ad break, and I must have been watching something streaming online, but it was like,
sounds great.
What's happening? Why am I getting this every single time? It's crazy.
Listen, vampires. Who doesn't love vampires? Emily is a vampire. That's just a little bit of trivia.
I kiss vampires every day.
Emily likes to kiss vampires. There's no better way to end this podcast than that. Thank you both. We can't wait to have you back in the future. And we'll talk soon.
All right.
Bye.
Bye, guys.